we go. I'm going to call to order the work session for the town of Chincoteague for July the 16th, 2020. If we could all please stand for the invocation.
Before I bow while we pray. Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who have gathered here today. May we all have the best interest of town at heart. Remember that everyone has an opinion and that everybody has a right to express that opinion. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself and for the measures of health that you granted us all. In Jesus' heavenly name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Well, welcome to people that are here in person and out in the hallway. For those that can't watch, there are people out in the hallway waiting. I request that you turn your cell phones off so we don't have to listen to those pleasant ringtones while we're meeting. Other than that, we'll start off. I need a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. First up is public comment, and for those, we'll go first, the people that signed up. Ms. Ruth Bowden? Massey? Sorry? Sorry, I can't read the last name.
Okay, no. Good evening, thank you, Mr. Mayor, everybody in the council. My name is Ruth Bowden Mascara. I've been on the island six months a year, 39 days, right about from the Parliament. And I just wanted to, when I was reading about the state of emergency, I wanted to say something because I care about this place. I've been coming here for about 75 years, not quite that long, but almost. And when I think of the things that have happened, that it really upset. So I wanted to give you some of my bona fides. I have been 25 years almost of emergency management experience, and I cannot remember the number of state of emergencies and executive orders I have written. I urge you to continue to use the executive order and the state of emergency as a tool in your toolbox. You make it what you want it to be, follow the right regs, and it will be beneficial to the citizens of the island. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Council, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Lynn Matthews, down the hallway.
I'm here for something pleasant. These are for you guys to pass out. This is an original article that was written in the Worcester Democrat paper, and it was published May the 10th, 1956. It says, Rooster Hancock devotes time, talent, and energy to the youth of the island. A man with no sons of his own, but with a keen interest in young people and their problems in the game of baseball, is responsible for the island's Little League and the Pony League. He is known affectionately by everyone as Rooster, but his real name, for the record, was Norman Hancock. He has been a barber on the island for 25 years. Almost 6 years ago, he began the dream of organizing a baseball team for the youngsters, but nobody seemed to be interested. I talked to everyone I knew, Rooster recalled. I told them that Salisbury and Pocomoke supported Little League teams, and there was no reason why we couldn't do the same for our kids. The reaction to this argument was negative until a lad by the name of Roy Daniel Talbert brought up the subject at home so persistently that his father, Roy Sr., finally went to Rooster to find out what it was all about. Rooster explained what he planned to do, and from then on, it was a lot easier. Talbert took the problem to the Kiwanis, and they promised to sponsor a team. I had to beg everything at first, said Rooster, smiling, bats, balls, gloves, until we got other sponsors, like the Volunteer Fire Company. And he said, he went on, we had a grand total of $163.50 to start out with. And it was a tough struggle, but we are starting this season in the clear. As a matter of fact, we spent several $1,000s last year in improving the Wilton Field where the games are held. Another thing that helps us financially, Rooster remarked, is that we have been given refreshment concessions at the high school football games from Tommy Phillips. The principal has coordinated with us all along. Rooster, one of the most modest of men, wished us to be sure to mention other men in the community who have spent uncountable hours on the Little League and Pony League teams. They are Eugene Davis, John Gallagher, Leon Juster, and the new league president, Elwood Turlington, and there and a lot of others who help make our league possible. And there is no way to thank them for what they have done. So all I'm asking, there's more to it, is that you consider naming the Little League field after my grandfather. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next on the list is Bobby Lappin.
How you doing, Mayor, Council? I'd just like to ask that later on, I'd like to be able, as a town official from the fire department, to be able to speak when it comes to the CARES Act funding program and also the state of emergency later on during your Q&A. If that's okay, I'd like to be
We
official as
have
well.
questions for you, sure.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got for now.
All right. Next up is James Letterman, or Fetterman, I'm sorry. Fetterman. James. Oh, shoot. I'm really getting bad.
Not Dave, but. Can have
Looks
mine.
like a M.
All right, the reason I'm here mainly, I want to thank you as a mayor, most of all Brian Rush, for the excellent job that he has done to keep this community safe. And I know several of you other council people were in here at the time that all this went on. But I do not understand wanting to withdraw the funding from this. I don't understand it. I wish somebody who had served on it before could, well, Gene, can you tell me why you changed your mind?
The funding, like you say, we pay for PPEs, and like I say, the part about cleaning bathrooms, that FEMA would pay for in overtime. We're not using overtime, are we, for doing the bathrooms?
We are not.
The PPEs, the town pays for anyway, is that correct?
So the town has not paid for any PPE up to this point. We've gotten FEMA drops, and the fire company has supplied their own PPE, and the FEMA drops has supported the police department.
We did in the past, Councilman Taylor, and I was incorrect when I told you before that we pay for all of them. We don't pay for all of them.
But the FEMA's not gonna cut, like I say, the thing, we're still with the state, emergency,
So
state of emergency.
I have a further explanation on that, and as to the funding is not in jeopardy at this time, and I will explain that further when we get to that part of the agenda.
Right. So you understand what I'm saying? The funding for that is in jeopardy. We are not expending overtime for our bathrooms to be paid for by FEMA. we're giving comp time, we are taking care of bathrooms on the weekends, you understand what I'm saying? But we're giving our employees comp time for being here on the weekends to clean our bathrooms.
Okay, I fully don't understand it, you know, I think about him as rescue, you know, safety and rescue. I don't know that much about the bathrooms, but I do understand if you have money coming in and it's there and has been for years helping you, why would we cut it out? Now, Billy, you weren't here.
The
You
only
just
thing-
got on here, so you don't really know.
Well, I do, I mean, I did read up on it before we took the vote, and, you know, I was looking at FEMA's website and what was under the Stafford Act, and there was no mention that a local state of emergency had to exist. It basically came about when, the way I read it, the way I understand it, and I also got confirmation from FEMA this week as well, because I wanted to make sure I was 100% clear on it
Yeah.
as well, because I wouldn't want to cost anybody any money. But from the way I understand it, when the federal government, and you can correct me anytime I say something wrong, Brian, when the federal government declared their state of emergency via President Trump, that's what activated this. Now, it
Well,
does,
that's Totally, so you're 100% correct on once it's been activated, we must declare a state of emergency in order to get in on funding. But what I will show you and tell you later is that
Okay.
we are eligible still for funding, even though we came out of the declaration. But we had to make our own declaration initially, which again, March 19th is when we were able to start claiming funding. And we can still, right now, claim funding at this point, even though we
Right.
don't have an active declaration.
right.
That's information that I found out. I know Mr. Bott asked at the last meeting, so I've got complete clarification on that for us when we get to that part of the agenda.
So basically, Jane, the $8,500, what we're eligible for, again, unless I'm mistaken, is 75% of whatever we ended up submitting as acceptable expenses whenever the president or FEMA decides to cut that program off, which hasn't happened yet.
It has not.
Right.
Okay, did this come about mainly like with COVID and things going on?
What's that?
The funding for this particular thing or not? I don't know, I'm just
Well, that's,
asking.
it came about because of this particular state of emergency.
Yeah, okay. But it looks like to me you won't pull out of something when you look at our town now, our community. We don't know how the tourism is gonna affect us as far as more people coming down with it. And I think you know, I really believe, I don't know anything about it, it just blew my mind when I heard it. But I would trust this man with my life.
And
I
I
don't
do too.
think anybody could have done any better job than what, and Arthur, I know you and Jim West was here, and Michael, you wanting, and Chris is new, Matthew, I don't know what your thoughts are on it. But I don't think we should start cutting anything that's gonna be here to help us. And I want to thank you again, Brian, for doing an excellent job and keeping us safe.
Thank you, Jane.
All right, that's the end of our live. We do have letters that were sent in that I'm gonna allow them to read because of the COVID and the lack of seating available in the chambers. So, settle in.
We actually have 6 letters that were requested to be read. So I'll go through all 6 of them. When Brian Rush gave his report concerning emergency management, I listened very carefully to what he said concerning the effect of doing away with the mayor's executive order on COVID-19 restrictions. It made perfect sense to me that the order be left in place to ensure the safety as well and well-being of the citizens of the island we call home. I was taken aback when a member of the council made the motion to discontinue the order and the immediate second on that motion by another. The mayor rightly called for discussion. There was a lot of indignation and yelling, and I was not expecting to see or hear, but that aside, I was most alarmed that it passed. There were only a couple of residents in attendance at the meeting, and therefore the people of the community did not have a chance to voice any of their concerns. Boom, done. Since that vote, much discussion has taken place in the community and on social media indicating that there are indeed some citizens that are very concerned about dropping this order. I am hoping you are here. I'm hoping you also hear from some of them. They may not be as outspoken as myself, and that is their choice, but I hope they step up. What it comes down to, in my mind, is that Mr. Rush gave an honest presentation of the facts and why we should keep the order in place. No real reason was given for discontinuing something that keeps our community safe. You asked Mr. Rush to do a job, he does it apparently very well, yet you cannot take his recommendation when it is offered. Yes, we are still in phase 3 according to the governor, but I, for one, was happy that the mayor took the measures to try to keep this community safe, knowing that the tourist industry is crucial, but also understanding that there are risks to our community in not being careful. This order protects citizens, none of whom were given prior notice that this would be voted on. That seems to be unfair to me, given that you should be representing the people. In closing, I want to thank Mayor Leonard for conducting the meeting as fairly as possible, Mrs. Richardson for her vote for the people, Mr. Rush for his explanation of the facts, and I ask that you consider, or reconsider, this decision, and if possible, call for another vote with all the other members present and with more input from your constituents. I am hoping this is not the only letter you receive. I am hoping people are watching online this evening, and I appreciate your time in listening to my concerns this evening. Paula Nees. Dear councilpersons Bott, Taylor, McComb, and Reed, I am writing to express my extreme displeasure with your vote, your broadsiding of Mayor Leonard with reference to the ending of the EO that was issued by Mayor Leonard to keep our town safe during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Mayor Leonard was within his rights as mayor to issue policies or executive orders he felt were in the best interest of the 3,000 plus residents to keep us safe and keep our numbers of infection down. Considering the average age of residents with 60 plus, a good number of medically fragile residents, his order were timely and effective. According to Mr. Rush, keeping the EO in place allows Chincoteague to continue to receive FEMA money. The town has received $8,500 to date. If the town were to exit the EO, those monies would not be allocated. Is the town so wealthy now that it wants to lose that funding going forward? I doubt that very much. Mr. Rush indicated that should the mayor issue another EO, the town could have to reapply for FEMA funds. If you are not aware, every state and county in the country has applied for these funds. Do you honestly think Chincoteague is going to move to the top of some FEMA list for the payout of funds? I really don't think any of the four of you did your homework on this one. My other concern is that you obviously talked about this beforehand and decided you were going to vote for one council member being absent and without discussing your concerns with Mayor Leonard. When the mayor asked you for your rationale, you had none. Sputter, sputter, motion, second. None of you had to give an answer. Frankly, I don't care what you've now had time to come up with to spend this vote. I've heard everything from we're still under Commonwealth guidelines to being upset about EO being issued without council approval to police on the bridge. My personal opinion is that none are an excuse, and your actions to override Mayor Leonard have backfired spectacularly. You allowed no discussion. You did not listen to the EOC employee who has the facts. You voted knowing a vocal council person wouldn't be present. You waited until after the election, and several of you have tried to justify it with because we can. You obviously don't know how to play nicely in the sandbox. My vote will reflect this when any of you are up for re-election. In closing, I will reiterate my extreme displeasure with your vote and your actions. I expect better from my elected officials, and you have proven I'm not going to get that. Sincerely, Deborah Martin, Chincoteague. Councilman Taylor, Bott, Reed, and McComb. With the current situation with COVID-19 and being a high-risk individual, I'm not able to attend public meetings, but do watch them from home. So I decided a letter would be a good option, since most of you, Mr. McComb excluded, have not made your contact information available otherwise to the public. I am writing to each of you mentioned above for the same reason. With the same question, My question is as follows. I would like to know how your vote to end the state of emergency for Chincoteague is a benefit to the residents and taxpayers of the island. As a resident and taxpayer, I should be afforded the opportunity to have an explanation. Each of you were voted into council by the public with the expectation that your decisions are for the good of the town and its people. I am requesting that this letter be read publicly and that you respond publicly at the next workshop meeting, so everyone who watches from home or attends can hear your reasoning. If you felt it was in the best interest of the people who you represent, you should have no problem making those reasons public. Brenda Watson, resident.
Sorry.
Dear Council, I am perplexed by the town's recent decision to come out of the state of emergency. In listening to the EOC remarks, it would seem that there was no benefit and potentially cost to us taxpayers. The town orders complied with the governor's orders. Eliminating SOE status changed nothing for residents, visitors, or local businesses, but disqualifies our town for certain emergency funding pots. It appeared that council members sought to ensure the mayor did not exert undue power. This seems strange as citizens and property owners had no warning of this potentially explosive decision by council members. Furthermore, the lack of discussion and speed of the vote would indicate that our council members met once again ex parte. This was not on a public agenda. Seemingly, council members have exerted their power for no useful purpose. Might taxpayers and voters presume you would like to be in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act as part of your commitment to representative government? Would you extend the time to disclosing conflicts of interest and recusing yourself from voting where you have the appearance of financial interest? An example, council members who are developers voting on issues related to development. May we all presume that Chincoteague Council will no longer take off during the summer when the majority of property owners and residents on the island, as opposed to the dead of winter when many snowbirds are away. Accountability extends more than one way. Generally, I compliment this council. You are volunteers who have your town's best interest at heart. I believe you are striving to be above board. I support your efforts. If you are truly committed to the transparency, then consider 1, posting contact information for all council people. It is bizarre that you do not share information with your constituents. You can have an email account with your constituents to contact you. 2, set a process in place that permits all citizens, property owners, an opportunity to express their views. While we all recognize that an SOE may occur suddenly, coming out of one while nearly 1 in 30 people in the county have tested positive for the CV-19 seems premature, especially as the staff you have appointed to the process advised against it. 3, commit to operating in the sunshine so that your constituents can hear your reasoning. 4, commit to year-round meetings or meetings taking place when the island is mostly populated as opposed to important decisions being made when the island is least populated. 5, proactively discussing potential conflicts of interest when voting. Thank you for your hard work and for your considering this letter. Chincoteague has done a remarkable job of keeping the residents safe thus far, although I am sad that you chose this manner and time to strike a blow for representative government. I hope that you embrace transparency and differing viewpoints moving forward. Praying for your success as always. Respectfully, Teresa Bulger Moore. Dear Mayor Leonard and members of the Chincoteague Town Council, my name is Susan Milligan. My family has been visiting Chincoteague since 1972. My husband and I have been homeowners on the island since June of 2016. I was dismayed by the decision of the council to end the state of emergency related to the COVID-19 global pandemic and at its meeting on July 6th. I'm respectfully requesting that the council take the following actions at its next meeting. Reinstate the state of emergency relating to the COVID-19 global pandemic. The U.S. and Commonwealth of Virginia continue to be under states of emergency, so it is difficult to understand how the council could conclude that the emergency was over and vote to end the state of emergency at its July 6th meeting. Reinstating the state of emergency will send an important message to the residents and visitors that the council takes the global pandemic seriously. It would also remove any doubt about the ability of the town to take advantage of funding provided by the CARES Act for local government expenditures that are related to the pandemic. As a taxpayer, this is important to me. There is no reason for the town to wait until new cases occur on the island to declare a state of emergency. At this time, based on publicly available information, it appears that all coastal counties between Florida and New Jersey, except for Appomattox and Northampton counties, are new reporting cases of the virus. Or now, I think that's supposed to mean reporting cases of the virus. This includes that all other coastal counties on Delmarva and the coastal mainland of Virginia. In many of these coastal areas, the number of cases is increasing. In other words, new cases in Chincoteague are inevitable. The time for the council to act is now. Request that an attorney research whether the town's laws and or council rules permit or can be amended to permit the council to meet remotely and to allow individual council members to participate in the in-council and in-council meetings remotely. I commend Mayor Leonard for taking a hard decision to essentially lock down the island after the council's declaration of a state of emergency on March 19th. In my view, it was the right decision to protect the residents of the island, given the limited medical resources that exist on the eastern shore. My husband and I respected the decision and did not come to the island until the mayor's executive order action expired in mid-May. However, the council plays an important role in the governance of the island, and the members of the council need to have the ability to discuss important actions and have the impact upon the residents in the island, of the island and visitors in public meetings. Having the authority to hold council meetings remotely or to have individual council members participate remotely, including having the ability to vote, would facilitate this important goal. The current situation is not the only one in which remote meetings and remote participation by individual members of the council would be useful. Emergencies caused by storms or the illness or travel of council members are other examples of when the authority would be useful. Thank you for considering these suggestions and for your service to the residents of the island and visitors to the island. Susan Milligan. Dear Mayor and members of council, we would first like to personally thank Mayor Arthur Leonard and Brian Rush for their thoughtful and efficient management of the COVID-19 crisis on Chincoteague. We were so impressed with the time and care both of them put in to help the town deal with these issues with these extraordinary circumstances. Mayor Leonard went out of his way to phone us and took time to listen to our concerns and fears in the early days of March before issuing the first emergency order. We greatly appreciate the difficult decisions which were made to keep us safe. We believe that these measures, although challenging, greatly contributed to the relatively low numbers of cases we experienced on Chincoteague. It was therefore a great shock to see the council meeting from last week, and we were dismayed by the lack of concern for the town that was shown by the council members who proposed and voted that the state of emergency be ended. In fact, these council members wanted this change without even a discussion or explanation. The only excuse for the move was that was provided during the meeting or afterwards was that the mayor made the decisions for the town during the SOE without consulting the full council. I would suggest that if we, who are not personal friends of the colleagues of the mayor, were able to express our concerns to him directly, it would seem very likely that any of the council members would also be able to discuss their thoughts with him as well. This vote made no sense and seemed to be very disrespectful to the mayor, the emergency management coordinator, and the electorate. The news from nearby beach communities of Ocean City and Rehoboth is alarming. Without safeguards in place, we could miss out on relief funds and resources that are sorely needed by our community should we experience a surge in cases. Additionally, if we have the need for a cool hand on the tiller during this time of emergency, it would seem that our mayor has proven he can handle it. If possible, we'd request that the council reverse course and return Chincoteague to the state of emergency. Sincerely, Tina and Bob Zolper. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. All righty. Moving on to agenda item 6. Well, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come. We can talk a little bit about the transportation developmental plan for Chincoteague. What we've taken part in the last year was an initiative that the state of Virginia put in place for a consultation group, CTG. They are Kinetics Transportation Group out of Atlanta, Georgia. Their charge was to go to various communities within the state of Virginia, help their transportation departments take a critical look at to what their funding would be, what their needs would be over the next pending 10 years. A 10-year plan. Why 10 years? It gave the state the opportunity to take a look at projected spending that would be coming for the state and how they would be able to allocate those kind of funds to do that. The consulting group was with us for several days, 3 days total, and they actually met with some of the local vendors, some of the local stakeholders. I mean, some of our council members were part of the interview group that they had. They also rode the trolleys, which I thought was interesting because they got to meet our local community. 2 of the 3 that were here wanted to stay, which I think is kind of a compliment to what our community is all about. The interesting focus was that they chose to focus on developing goals and objectives for the ability to establish things that we needed to work towards, and then achieve those and how we were going to do that. First goal was to maintain the existing program that we had. They were pleased to see that it operates in a safe attitude, provides good service to our community. What they did recommend, and I think this is kind of unique for us because we are probably one of the smallest transportation systems in the state. We are seasonal. Our assets include 3 trolleys, a van, and then any other things that we have readily available. We can use Harvey's vehicles to substitute some of the transportation that we need. We do focus on using the van for more handicapped folks on the island right now. We are focusing now on driver education. Important for us, although most of our drivers are school bus drivers and teachers, there are things related to the regulatory changes within our state with transportation that have to be focused upon. Testing that has to occur. Education for the folks with drugs and alcohol, those kind of things. And regulatory compliance is a big issue. It's an initiative, I think, for the transportation, for the Federal Transit Authority to move to a state of kind of professionalism within the industry, which is my background is healthcare, and I remember going through those kind of initiatives a number of years ago. The second goal was to maintain mobility options. The mobility they're referring to is that as the data collection occurs about initiatives in our community and the needs of our community, that we have that flexibility to adjust and adapt to those needs. Important in this day and time. What we've developed is a transportation plan that is far different than what we ordinarily run. We'll be offering services 3 days a week. We did the data collection, looked at when actually the transportation needs for the fall and for the community were Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're going to be running in that initiative. It's important because we have to have the flexibility to change the routes to meet the needs of the community. An example of that was that Vernon talked to some of the people that stay in the harbor. They come to our community, they live on their boat, which is pretty convenient. They've requested that we put in place in the future a route that goes to the harbor to meet their needs. Well, we cheated. We were to start some of these initiatives. That was one that will come up. We will begin providing services down there. And changes to make Pine Grove a permanent, more frequent area because of the growth needs there. The island changes with the population, with growth within private businesses. This gives us the flexibility to meet those needs of those communities. The other thing that they were impressed with was to meet the needs of our community outreach. My previous background was healthcare, and my initiatives in that was I work psychiatry. A lot of folks know that, so they shun me on the streets, which. But it points out that with the experience I had was that the community outreach is a sensitive area. We have found that beginning about a year ago, we could do that here. And we found that there were things that the community would benefit from by being involved with the trolley system. We did put in place a Ride to Read program for the toddlers. Partnering with the library, we do a program with them where they bring transportation to the library to help educate the kids about what the transportation needs are. The other thing is that about a year ago, responding to the needs of our community education programs, the schools, the fact that the teachers spend a lot of money buying their own supplies, we put in place a program called Stuff the Trolley. Now, if you can imagine, we actually stuffed Pied Piper with educational supplies for the teachers. So that was something that we would like to continue. Current standards, I guess, with COVID-19, we're going to interfere with some of those programs now, but those are things we will continue. Some of the growth opportunities they suggested, the harbor route, we beat them to it. We got that up and running. they suggested that we develop a bi-directional transportation system, meaning we would have 2 trolleys. In our estimation, when we really took into consideration of that, that would create more of a traffic congestion that would issue, so we passed on that. They also suggested we develop a beach express. Now, we have one of those running from the campground over there. Now, that was being considered, but I've had some conversations with Mr. Tolbert about that's a pretty political hotspot, particularly in years past, in that the struggles that were up between the town and the refuge about if we did one of those, who's going to be responsible for that? Why do we have to do parking? So we, with Mike's input, we decided, well, we'll stay clear of that one. Funding for this, like everything else we've done, remains grant funded. Interesting because for folks that don't know, where the federal government covers 80% of the grant, state covers 16%, and the local funding is 4%. We supplement that with fares. Now, why do I bring that up? One of our initiatives this year that we were going to hike prices for the ride on the trolley. We were going from 25 cents to 50 cents. Now, part of the discussion I thought was interesting in the vendors when they met with consulting groups, we had considerations for maybe we make it $1. That didn't work. Maybe we make the adults pay the $1 and the kids ride for free. That didn't work either. So what seemed to be more palatable was the 50-cent deal. So we went with that. That was to start this year. And the COVID initiative, the problem we're dealing with that, has really impacted our system as well as the community. Our cash flow from the government for the funding that ordinarily we would count on has been kind of put askew a little bit. We have received thus far 2 contributions of just a little bit over $4,000. It's supposed to last us until September, when they anticipate maybe our grant will be approved by then. Maybe the funding will be approved by then, and we can move forward with that. Now, the $4,000, with the plan we have in place and the fact that we're being pretty conservative with it, that will last. I mean, that will work forward with us. But one of the things that came along was the CARES funding. And we struggled with that because it's unclear. Mr. Tolbert's experience with that helped us kind of take a good look at that. And I'll give him the chance to talk a little bit about that.
Real quickly, DRPT came through and gave us a pot of money. It's sitting there in our account or our grant management system under our name to the tune of about $76,000, and they said this was CARES money and you can operate on that. We had a conference call, myself and Karen, with the DRPT representative about that, and I told him that it was my understanding that CARES funds, and they also sent a resolution with this showing us, because you're this, and this, you can use CARES money. The resolution was correct, but we didn't fit any of the criteria that were this, and this in the resolution. So we had a chat with them. They assured me that they would be audited and not us, and they would be responsible and not us. And I thank the gentleman. Said I've known y'all for about 3 or 4 minutes now, and I don't think we'll be spending any of this money. So it's still sitting there with our name on it, but until they come through and tell us, someone else tells us that we can use that money, we're not going to touch it. We're going to operate on a couple of $4,000 stipends, I guess, for lack of a better word, we've been given to this point, and the grant was approved in the normal time, but that grant hasn't been funded yet, and according to the folks that Larry has talked to, it won't be funded until sometime in September, which is about 30 days or so later than it normally is. And in any event, we have money to operate till then we do.
I guess the thing that I would want you to hear is that although this kind of puts everything in kind of a gray area, this is an exciting time for our transportation department, because we have developed and looked forward to putting this program in place for the next 10 years. We will bring quality services to this island. Now, we're kind of restricted by the size of our environment, but how we get around that is that we increase the amenities to the customers that use our services. A lot of technology that becomes available. that DRPT can make available for us through the grant funding. I don't want to sound like this is the end of the situation, but it's really something that we're looking forward to do. So I thank you for your time. The program itself, it's about 100 and some pages. It is on the share drive, and I think that was made available, and we also made some hard copies available for folks. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Larry,
Yes, ma'am.
did you notice that the Ride to Pony Express is in this on the DML magazine?
What?
It's very small.
Cost me a lot of money to put that in there.
Now.
Been bigger so you can see it.
Very good. Thank you very much.
It cost $76,000.
Thank you, Larry.
Alrighty, next on the agenda is the Eastern Shore broadband update. Yep. Sir, come on up.
My name is Robert Bridgham, for those of you who haven't met me, and I'm the Executive Director of the Eastern Shore Broadband Authority. I want to thank you for allowing me this time to talk a little bit about what we're doing on the island and also here on the shore, and talk a little bit about what we're looking to do on the island of Chincoteague. I put a little presentation, I didn't make it long, so we can flip through very quickly. Just for those of you who may not be very familiar with the Broadband Authority, the Broadband Authority started in 2008 as a wireless authority. Doesn't mean we do wireless necessarily, it just means that we're funded or created under the Wireless Act. Allows us to provide telecommunication services here within the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we were formed by both Accomack and Northampton County, and we've been operating and expanding our network over the past decade or so. Flip to the next page, Mike. We offer what's called Ethernet transport, which allows businesses to connect between sites. SONET services, very traditional services. Some of our federal partners here on the shore prefer services such as SONET. Dense wave division multiplexing for folks that are trying to get from, let's say, Europe up to Ashburn and stuff. You may have heard of transatlantic cables coming to Virginia Beach. That's the type of technology that those transatlantic providers would use. We also offer commercial dedicated internet services, which is what we've kind of been our mainstay for quite a long time. Metro area network and wide area networks. We've also offered free wireless hotspots here on the shore, and we just recently, about 3.5 years ago, started offering fiber to the home. Next page. I want to call out the free wireless hotspots for two reasons. One of them is that there is one here on the island. It's right at the library. But the other thing is that as COVID-19 obviously has, decided to rear its ugly head here in the country, we have actually been working with the Chamber, we've been working with both school districts and the community college to try to provide wireless access points here on the shore that are free for people. So for those who don't have broadband at their houses, at least in the interim until they can get broadband, these sites are available for people for students, for parents, whatever the case may be, to be able to get access. So this list is on our website, so anybody can go to our website, esvba.com, and you can look at it. We've got a map of it, so you can click on it to try to find it. It's got the addresses of each of these sites. We also are always welcome to the different towns and stuff offering additional suggestions. So if there are common meet points, we've offered it to any of the towns. Provide your suggestions, and we can see if we can facilitate providing extra hotspots for your community. To the next page. Big thing here, and this is really the crux of the discussion, is fiber to the home. So the Broadband Authority for quite a few years only offered commercial services. At the time, we were trying to just build our network. We were here initially to serve NASA and actually create a fiber optic backbone here on the shore. And we kept getting questions about, well, your fiber's right here, why can't I get to it? And I don't have connectivity, I'm on this neck, or I'm down this road that nobody else can get to, please provide service. And for years, we held back on doing it. There were a lot of wireless ISPs here on the shore that were trying to do it, trying to be effective at it. But we had meeting after meeting where we got a lot of feedback that we needed to do this. So we commissioned a study by CTC Energy Group. They did quite a long study. They had town council meeting, or town hall meetings in both counties to kind of talk about what's going on, what the shore wants, what the shore needs. And the long and short of it is that it seems like it was a very positive thing for us to do fiber to the home. So this is our rate structure right now. So we offer a 10 megabit service by 5, a 25 by 10, a 50 by 25, and 100 by 50. Any one of these four rate levels are available for people anywhere that our network exists. And again, very cost effective, very reasonable for most folks. If you flip to the next page, this is kind of the exciting part, if you like. today on Chincoteague, this is what the SUVA has for fiber. So again, we actually come across on the old island, even though it looks like we come in on Chincoteague Road. But we basically go out to Assateague, we go all the way down to the Harbor Master. Obviously, we serve here, the fire department, a couple other key sites. And what we're looking to do is we took, about a year and a half ago, a $5 million loan out to help expand our footprint on the Eastern Shore, because we realized that we kind of got to a point where we wanted to be able to serve a lot more of the communities, and we weren't able to do it with our current funding. So Mike, if you look to the next slide. This is the part that I want to talk about. So what you see in red now on this picture is where we're going to be building shortly. We're going to be extending all the way up to the northern end of the shore. We're going to kind of close the loops on the east side of the shore, or on the island. But essentially, we're trying to get our main backbone as close to every neighborhood here on within the island as possible. What you see in blue is also all pre-designed, so we've already got the designs to go down essentially almost every road and street here on the island of Chincoteague. The point of that is that as people want to sign up for broadband services from the Broadband Authority, we've already got the network reach as close as possible to folks. We've already got the engineering done and in place, so we can literally just start placing the cable down to individual neighborhoods as people are looking for services. So I wanted to make sure that the council knew what we were doing. The other thing is that we, and this is really more of a conversation with the council. The Broadband Authority, when we endeavored to start this project, we were going to just build every street everywhere across all of the shore, or all the incorporated towns of the shore, just to clarify. But we found that, for one, we kind of tried to take a little more conservative approach. It's not a money thing. We do have the money to build all of this. Part of it is that we're where the demand is. With Corona hitting the Eastern Shore obviously pretty heavily not too long ago, and obviously the rest of the country, we are trying to leverage that money as far as we can. We're also trying to go out for federal and state funding to try to expand that network and get it as close as we can to people. We're heavily working, like I said, with the community college and the school districts. But our plan is now to really try to get the network right to the edge of everyone's neighborhood, essentially. So anyone who wants to sign up for it, they have access to it. Actually, even as of the current moment, people can sign up for it. But it may take us time to just get down that particular leg of, like, again, if we have to go up Deep Hole Road or things of that nature, just to extend further. But I wanted to, again, talk to the council. It's been a long time since the Broadband Authority has come and present, and I think that Chincoteague was certainly part of our inception and was very fundamental in the formation of the Broadband Authority. So we want to make sure that we talk to the council, give you a little bit of update on what we're doing, and ask if there's any questions about what we're doing.
Council? Questions? I look forward to being able to use it. Well, I take it back. I have been using it at my business for a couple of years now. It's been very good. Very, very good.
Well, and again, for anyone on Chincoteague, it is available today. So where the network currently is, it's just ready immediately. But people can sign up anywhere on the island at this point. It's 100% available.
I do have a question. So your blue lines are your intended, that'll be a fiber to the home type situation, the blue lines?
So I should have probably put a third color, would have been easier. Mike, can you go back one slide for a moment?
Yes.
Again, this is where the network currently exists, and this is why, as I'm looking back at it, I probably should change it. So like on East Side Road, we go up to Cherry Stone,
right,
and we stop there. If you go forward one slide, Mike.
Mike, would you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Chincoteague Shellfish.
Yeah. Sorry. If you see on this map that we actually are going to build the rest of that immediately. So that's already, anything in red is either completed or absolutely going to be built. We're actually just finalizing mobilization, finalizing the procurement for the fiber. I'm going to be starting it. The blue lines are essentially the neighborhoods of the local town street, or local streets where a lot of the houses are. So if somebody, if I could go up here for a moment, not to get too close, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But if somebody had a house right here, we would, what we would do is we would essentially respond to them, say, yes, service is available. We would just build this particular segment for them. Somebody was, off of this street, we would certainly come into this neighborhood as well. But the idea is that everything in red gets our network sort of to the edge or to the curb, for lack of a better term. And then people would then sign up, and as they sign up, we would build each of these little blue segments to complete the service to their house.
I got you.
And thereby also making it available for anybody else on that street immediately.
Right. Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Very nice.
All right, thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the adoption of the vehicle and traffic code. I think is that you, Robin?
Well, that's, I believe it, we do it every year.
Just a house.
Yes, we, this, our
It's a
ordinance.
requirement.
Yes, the ordinance book, I believe 58.2, and we have to adopt the vehicle code and the DUI laws in order to get our funding back.
Right. All righty. Do I hear a motion for the adoption of the vehicle and traffic code?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next up is the Warren resolution. Mr. Toller.
Yes, sir, and just to give you, the background is in your packets, but just to give you the synopsis of this, Warren Virginia Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network is a network of professionals who operate water and wastewater throughout the state. If there is an emergency in Chincoteague, for instance, we contact them. They find us qualified operators that could come here and help us repair our system, build out our system. We are responsible for the cost of that, but this is basically, for lack of a better term, a letter of an MOU or an MOA that will allow us to request assistance. At the same time, it's a mutual aid kind of thing. At the same time, if there's another locality who could use our expertise, they might request it from us. They are responsible for the bills, but this sets up the framework that allows us to do that and allows them to reciprocate. There is a resolution for such that I'll read if you before you adopt it. Resolution authorizing execution of Virginia Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network Mutual Aid Agreement. Whereas the National Infrastructure Program Protection Plan, and in particular the sector-specific plan for the water sector developed in the United States Environmental Protection Agency, identifies the development of a water wastewater agency response network in each state and as an important means of helping to ensure resilient water and wastewater infrastructure in the public interest. And whereas the furtherance of such national water section plans, Virginia's long-standing nationally recognized professional associations known as the Virginia Section of the American Water Works Association and the Virginia Water Environmental Association have jointly formed the Virginia Water Wastewater Agency Response Network Committee to develop the EPA recommended network and associated procedures for implementation in Virginia. And whereas the Virginia Warren Committee has developed and the attached form of the Virginia Warren Mutual Aid Agreement for use in public and private water sectors for purposes of requesting assistance in responding to such request, as well as related form of an event agreement for providing assistance of a defined scope on defined terms and conditions. And whereas this Virginia Warren Mutual Aid Agreement is intended to supplement and integrate with the statewide mutual aid program administered by the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, with the Emergency Management Assistance Compact and with other mutual aid agreements of local, interstate, and intrastate scope. And whereas the town of Chincoteague Incorporated is responsible for public water supply in the Commonwealth of Virginia and is therefore eligible to participate in Virginia Warren and the Virginia Warren Mutual Aid Agreement. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the Town of Chincoteague, the town manager is hereby authorized to execute the Virginia Warren Mutual Aid Agreement, which is hereby approved, adopted by the council this date.
All righty, I'll entertain the motion.
And no cost.
No cost.
No cost.
Unless we use it.
Fix something.
Yeah, but no cost.
Or obligation. There are no dues.
Right.
And there's no obligation. If someone requests assistance from us and we can't provide it, we don't have to.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All righty. Looks like everybody's gonna have a chance to think. Next on the agenda is the Wayfinder, and I believe that's Harvey. Or is it Mike? I was gonna spread it around. I'm gonna let Harvey go.
Is this something you can put up in the, page for everybody? As I'm sure you're all very much aware, we're in the final phase of the multimodal trail transportation project. The remaining budget, which we will exhaust those funds this year, is $295,000, the majority of which will be used to extend sidewalks further down Maddox, starting with Chicken City and going down to the traffic circle. I'm not sure exactly how much money we'll be able to, or how much sidewalk we'll be able to construct. Before you tonight is the Wayfinder plan, which was part of the original proposal we submitted to Fish and Wildlife Service to develop this plan. It was reviewed by the Public Works Committee last Tuesday night, and they're on board with it. But the plan consists of a map, which will be available online as well as in hard copy, and also the let me get the signage up too. Well, and in addition to the map, there's a signage. I think most of you hopefully have had an opportunity to see it, but it will not only identify the trail, but it will identify significant public features in the area, like the libraries and the parks and the carnival ground and the museum and so on and so forth. We shied away from doing anything commercial. Still working with Chamber to develop some QR codes that will actually go on these signs. And scan it with your smartphone and it tells you what's there, how to go here, there, so on and so forth. That's still in its infancy. So again, Public Works Committee approved the plan. The total cost to construct the actual signs is $4,600 and some change. That does not include the sign poles, so probably $55,000 to install all these signs.
Is this expandable, Harvey? Not, I know with the refuge, they're paying from the refuge town. But if the town at a later date wanted to expand it, say carry it to Memorial Park or Harbor?
Absolutely.
On our dollar.
Yeah,
On our dollar.
Yeah, on our
Sure.
dime. Yeah.
Which a lot of these, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see, but we don't have a large scale printer. There are signs right now down at the carnival ground by this plant, which will direct you to downtown, that will also direct you to Memorial Park. There are directions to the dog park, Furland. It's not purely the trail, it is the areas adjacent to the trail. But yes, it's certainly accurate.
All right, any questions? Or?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joey.
Harvey, it definitely gets used. No ifs, ands, or buts, but I know Mike can attest to that. One thing I do say as a safety thing, there by the Dollar General, as you will attest to, it gets used all times of night. Definitely in the dark. I mean, all times of night. And I'm not knocking that. But when you're backing out of Dollar General, all you get is the hear if you have your windows down that people are on that trail. They don't have lights on their bicycle, but you hear them if you don't have your window up and you're not listening to music yourself. You definitely need at least the bare minimum lighting there so people could see the people coming out of between the bridge and Dollar General. Like I said, that would be the bare minimum, and any kind of way you could do a safety down there, because like I said, those roads are muddled. The path is muddled with people using Dollar General. So any kind of way we can make it safer, think about there, because I mean, it definitely is used. I mean, I don't think nobody, I know that plan was started way back when, because I went there and looked up the deeds and stuff on it a long time ago, but I don't think nobody anticipated the amount of use that it's gotten. It wasn't money wasted. But we do want to make it safe as possibly can. So lighting and whatever kind of way you can separate the bike trail itself, to make it.
We certainly can add lighting, which is.
Yeah, I think that would be a bare minimum. So like I said, because when you're backing out of there, and it's all time of night, and like you say, all you do is hear the laughing and giggling, and but that means but you're not seeing anything, and you're just waiting that way. But if you've got your windows rolled up, air conditioning blaring, and your music blaring, you don't hear that. You're just backing up. Thank
Absolutely.
Any further questions?
Nice job.
All right, thanks, Art. Now, I need a motion to adopt the Wayfair plan.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
A second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All righty, moving on. The Smith Street project, which is parking lot, Mr. Talbot.
And I wanted to bring you an update on the Smith Street project. There are some in your supplemental folders there I left for you. There are some more information on the Smith Street project. It was discussed at the Budget Personnel Committee on Tuesday. And I'll give you a little background first. The land was gifted to the town in December of 2018. It was gifted with some, let's say, conditions, which are also there in your supplemental packet. We were to do a few things to the property on a schedule. It's there for your information. The project includes 42 parking spaces in the original parking lot. It includes paving the remainder of Smith Street Extended, which goes behind the old school building. Fill and grade seed the remaining spaces and create a sporting field. The installation of some playground equipment, and a picnic area, and some restrooms, which Harvey tells me were eliminated from the project. Last fiscal year, the budget for the Smith Street project was $67,000 for FY 2020. So far, and we did spend $67,000 on the Smith Street project in the last fiscal year. To date, we have spent $92,000 on this project. We spent $12,000 for engineering and design and permitting. And we've spent, in last fiscal year, we spent $55,000 on site work, and in this fiscal year, we spent the other $25,000, bringing us up to $92,000. What happened was the site work straddled the fiscal year, and we took the balance of last year's budget and put it in last year, and the balance of that contract we're spending in this year, which is $25,000. That leaves us, in this year's budget, was budgeted and approved for $75,000 for this project. We've already spent $25,000 of that, so that leaves $50,000 in this fiscal year for this particular project. The next phase of this project will be to pave the parking lot, stripe the parking lot, for the curbs and sidewalks. Okay? The current quote on that part of the work is $60,000. It's just a few dollars under $60,000. We have secured a commitment from an individual to fund half of that, $30,000, toward this part of the project. Everyone here knows our current situation and what we're facing, or they know that what we're facing is unknown, and that we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can be in this atmosphere. So my question to you this evening is, would you like to pursue or like to apply the other $30,000 from our budget this fiscal year and proceed with the work to pave the parking lot and get the concrete work done?
Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Mike, I got a question.
Yes.
Did David make us pave the parking lot?
The parking lot was, the plans that I have, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been staring at them longer than I have. The base, the drainage work has been done, all the BMPs for land use has been done. The next step is to actually put surfacing on the parking lot and pour the curb and gutter and sidewalk.
I mean, at first I think stone sucks the water down, and the land and paving it just moves the water somewhere else. I think that's gonna make it harder to move the water.
That was the purpose of doing the drainage work first, so that when the paving is done, the water has someplace to go and knows exactly what to do. At this particular time, and to save money, we used millings for the base, which the town already had from milling up some of the streets here.
So
They were used as a base to be cost effective. I can tell you that those are not considered to be pervious when you use them on site. They're impervious, so to speak.
Yeah, I got you.
So we're going to get some runoff eventually.
Yeah.
From them, unlike using.
57 stone and, yeah, okay, you kind of messed up, look.
So, yeah, and the land use permit allows us to create an impervious.
And how far
area.
down Smith Street are you paving? Just where
It's
the
just
pickleball
past
court
the
is?
end of the property is my understanding.
Just to the pickleball court and the pickleball court?
No, I'll call it the east property line there behind the old backstop.
Just as far as the end of the property goes.
Oh, okay, you're gonna paint to the end? Okay.
But at the Budget and Personnel Committee on Tuesday night, my recommendation was that we don't know what we're facing as far as revenues this year. And that while I would desperately like to complete this project, you don't want to get started without completing it and without moving ahead on it. And I will say that the work we've done so far is sort of in a vulnerable position, because it can certainly, if somebody rides there through a Jeep and does donuts one night, we've got some work to do to fix it.
Yeah.
However, given that, my recommendation to the Budget and Personnel Committee on Tuesday night was that we do not proceed with it because of the unknown revenues situation that we're facing. We have no clue yet. Our meal and transit occupancy tax, after we started collecting them again, won't be due until the 20th of this month, so we don't even know what we're going to collect this month. We don't even have 1 month's worth of data yet. At the very least, I would like to see us postpone it until we have a better handle on what we're facing.
Yeah, May was horrible, but however, I think June's gonna be a different story.
Well, we'll certainly see all the people on the aisle, so.
June's gonna be a different
Spend
story.
some money.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
Mike, is
Yes,
there any kind of stipulations to us accepting that $30,000?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, timeline, anything like
No,
that?
Not to my knowledge. The original timeline is, the donor would like to see the original timeline followed, but obviously, we've gone past that time, so he would just like to see the project completed, as would I, and I'm sure as we all would. It's just that right now, in the current state of affairs that we are looking at, I can't see that we would place that expenditure on a park when we probably will be facing some much more critical items down the road.
At the Budget and Personnel meeting, Ellen was here, Bill was here, Chris, Arthur, I had expressed my issue that I had with accepting this property in the first place, because there were so many, what I felt like, conditions put on it. I want this done, I want that done, I want this done, and I want it done by this timeline. And I had said, long before COVID ever was even a word, I had said, you know, from year to year, you don't know what's gonna happen, that we may have issues down the line. It might be a bad summer, it might be, you know, whatever. I'm in agreement with you right now. I think that we need to back up a couple of inches here and just see what's gonna happen for the rest of the summer, because right now, I just don't think that we're in a position to move forward with getting it done on, you know, the way we wanna get it done. And when it is done, we want it done right.
Absolutely. I agree, and I can tell you, if I thought this was something that we could do in Public Works, if we had the time and the expertise to do this in Public Works, I think we would, Harvey and I would get together, and sometime when the season slacked up and we could catch our breath, we might go do some of this work. However, we don't have the equipment to pave the parking lot. I don't know that we have the expertise to pave the parking lot here. We could possibly do some of the concrete work, but I just don't see saving a lot of money in this particular project, on this particular item of this project, by doing work in-house. And that is to say that we've already done a lot of the work, as I think we all brought to you last month, some work that Harvey's crew had done, doing some of the concrete. They hauled most of the millings. We've provided the material for the base. That was no cost. The initial price, I should mention, that we got for the site work was over $200,000. Harvey was able to go out and find someone to do the work and did a very nice job of it, if you haven't seen it, for $80,000. So there was a considerable savings there, just by taking a little time to do some investigating.
So, Mr. Mayor, Mike, I guess that we can't use any of the funding that we get from the state for roads on this.
No, sir.
Okay. And I guess, you know, the remaining $30,000 for this, there's nothing that would possibly be available through AMPDC that could possibly fund some of this?
I could not answer that question. I can look into it.
Maybe we look into that and table this for this meeting and see what we can come up with.
Sure. I can definitely take a look at it and see what AMPDC can do for us.
Is that the consensus of council, is to table this item at this time? I don't think we need a vote. A nod of the head. All righty, we will table it and leave it be, and when funds are available, we'll better take care of it. All right, next on the agenda is the CARES Act funding, which I know a lot of people would like to know about. It could be Mike or Chris.
No, the Budget and Personnel meeting had good discussion on this. I'm going to turn it over to Mike because he's pretty on top of this, and I think this is pretty exciting, and it's good to see we're able to give this back to the community. Mike?
Thank you. As you know, our award from the county for the CARES Act was $251,981. The county did its own, did a small business assistance program with some of their money, not all of it, but some of it. They also set aside some $100,000 for working watermen. And I'll get back to that later. Please remind me if I forget, because that's very interesting. At the Budget and Personnel Committee meeting on Tuesday night, we presented a sample program. It kind of mirrors the county's program in that we set aside $30,000 of our $251,000 for working watermen, and the balance of that would be to go to a small business assistance program. Giving some of the highlights, eligibility for the program for the small business. Well, let me start with the working watermen. Working watermen would have to be true working watermen. They have to have a VMRC card. They have to certify that 51% of their income comes from actually working on the water. Just having a business that's related to the water would not necessarily make you eligible for that. The award for working watermen was agreed to be $5,000 per grant, block grant. And that about sums that. My direction was to set up the working waterman program first, and then go to the small business assistance program. The dates for that will be, applications will be available starting Wednesday, July 22nd. We've already made the applications. By the way, this program is in your supplemental packet that was there on the desk. It's hot off the press. If there's a typo, please forgive me. But the applications will be available in the town office starting July 22nd at 8 a.m. Turning back there, we will advertise this on Facebook. We will advertise this probably in the newspaper. We will, and I know the chamber is operating on a shoestring right now, but we will probably ask them for assistance for anybody they have with working watermen and small business, for ways that they can help us in getting the word out. It'll be put on the Times website. We may do a radio spot. We'll have to see. But we want to advertise it as well as we can to make sure everybody gets the word. Working watermen's applications will be due into the office July 29th, at 10 a.m. And as I said in the committee meeting, we will be receiving those in the office. As we receive them, we will mark them the correct date and time. We will award $5,000 grants based on the earliest qualifying application we have, and we will proceed to the last, we will proceed until all the money's gone. The agreement amongst the committee members was that if we don't award the entire $30,000 to working women, that the balance of funds that aren't rewarded will revert back to the small business program, and we'll award more grants on that side. And that about covers the working woman side. It also, I should mention that originally we were going to not qualify anyone who had received assistance already from the payroll protection program or the EDI, was it EIDL? Thank you. Or just unemployment. However, it was the feeling of the committee that we don't disqualify those folks, but just give them a lower priority when we start to rank the applications. So that's the way we have crafted the program and written the applications. Going to the Small Business Assistance Program, it was decided that grants should be a total of $4,000 per grant. There will be no smaller amounts for businesses that were differently affected. If you qualify, you will qualify for a $4,000 grant regardless of what your business did. We've given examples of the grants that qualify. I should say that the county's program qualified businesses under the governor's executive orders. I think it was 50 and 53, 51 and 53 and 55. Ours will qualify businesses under those two orders as well as the mayor's executive order, which include the basically accommodations on Chincoteague, which were not covered under the county's program. Some examples of businesses that qualify: restaurants, hotels, motels, theaters, hair salons, indoor outdoor public amusements, campgrounds. We will only qualify, of course, businesses and watermen who have, or businesses who have an address within the incorporated towns of Chincoteague, working watermen whose primary residence is within the incorporated limits of Chincoteague. That is another stipulation. Again, if you've received assistance, you will go to the back of the line, and we'll get to you if we can. So the $220-some-odd thousand that we will, I think $221,981, we will give that in $4,000 block grants as long as the money lasts. The Small Business Assistance Program, and that will happen after the Waterman's Program. Applications will be available starting August 3rd, and give me 1 second here to make sure I give you the right date. Applications must be submitted by August 18th. It's first come, first served. There'll be timestamp. Getting back to the county's program, and I spoke with an official at the county today, they had 83 applicants for the Working Watermen's Grant. They gave 20 grants, of course, so they gave all 20 out. And I believe I got the numbers right here. They were going to give 200 small business grants. They had a total of 81 applications. So they did not give all their money out. My question, of course, was, can we get some of it? The answer, of course, was no. They are not, and I won't speak out of turn here on this, they have some ideas, but the board of supervisors haven't approved it yet, so we don't want to jump the gun on that. But in any event, I think we will have no problem giving out our 44 or so business grants. I think there will be plenty of folks who get in line and qualify for that. I'm willing to take any questions for this. If you see anything, I'd like to get an approval on this program tonight so that we can proceed with it, because we intend to advertise it next week. If there's anything that you see in there, again, I said it was hot off the press. We've worked on it since the committee meeting on Tuesday. Anything you see in there that needs tweaking, adjusting, is anything you really don't like, please let me know so we can fix it, because we would like to proceed with this without delay so we can get the money into people's hands.
I believe the number was 55, right? We're gonna do 55 small business loans.
Whatever the math was.
I think it was
$4,000, right, yeah, you're right. The 44 was the original amount, but when we lowered the amount to 4,000,
Yeah.
55.
55 small.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment, please? Mike, going back to what you just said, you asked the county with their leftover money, could they distribute it, obviously, to us or others, and they said no.
Well, I have to say also, I wasn't speaking to the board of supervisors, just one of the members of the staff.
Okay.
Who related to me that that's not likely.
Okay.
So I
Yeah,
shouldn't talk
yeah.
out of turn here.
Which, is par for the course. I read it in one of the papers, not sure where, we might have discussed it at one of our meetings. The $251,000 that the town of Shingatig is getting, every single cent of that is gonna go to a business or a waterman. The county is keeping back approximately $1 million to work on some of their pet projects that they feel that they need to do. And given, and y'all know how I am with the county, we're a part of it, we gotta deal with them and everything, but I just find it totally a slap in the face to businesses out there that could use this money during this time, and that they've decided to keep $1 million to themselves to work on their projects. And that's just something I had to say.
I'm sure some of those watermen that didn't get granted would like to have some of that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Since it was so many of them.
So, Mr. Mayor, Mike, one thing, a couple questions I had. Number one, when you look into eligibility information, it limits businesses that employs 30 persons or less. And I kind of had a problem with that when I was reading it, because when you look at the Small Business Administration, the Federal Small Business Administration, the lowest ranking they have as far as employees, depending on the industry they're in, is 100. Sometimes as high as 500. And I understand what the county was trying to do here, because I called Rich today to speak to him, just seeing, how did you pick your number? And basically, they looked around, they kind of picked a number based on what they saw, the size of their businesses and things of that nature. So I guess my question is, we closed hotels through the local order. Campgrounds were closed by Virginia's order. So I kind of did a poll when I saw that number, and I called some businesses. And when you look at the people that we're really trying to help here, people like Tom's Cove, Hampton Inn, Comfort Suites, you've got the KOA, Maui Jacks, Rope Walk, Don's, Steamers, and then also, and that was it. That was the ones I called. I was actually able to reach. All those folks have over 30 people. So all of them would not be eligible based on this 30-person limit. So I guess my question is, do we want to put a limit on that is going to exclude a large portion of your businesses and some that we forcibly close as a town? So I that piece of it kind of struck home with me, like, is that what we really want to do in this program?
And we use the number 30 as well, for similar reasons. But that is a number that certainly can be easily changed. We can do it this evening.
For continuity with what is determined as a small business by both the Virginia agency and the federal agency, I would think that we would at least use their lowest limit, which is 100 people. To me, just thinking out loud, to keep us, no one can really question it. Then, how did you pick this number? Well, we looked at what the Small Business Administration said.
And the only thing I will say, and I'm aware of the Small Business Administration's numbers as well. However, I guess when you look at this community, and you look around the businesses, all of us are familiar with small businesses. Several of us have run small businesses or still do. And when I see a business that has more than 30 employees, I think of it as, for this area, kind of big. I understand they're not, and sometimes people don't realize the number of employees that a business actually has, because a lot of them work in the background.
Yeah, and a lot of them are teenage kids, part-time jobs, which we're all thankful that they provide. I don't know. I just had I have, like Denise said last night's meeting, Tuesday night meeting, I have heartburn with that. So it just kind of struck a chord there with me. And then the other thing is on the eligibility as far as if they had accepted EIDL or PPP, maybe instead of excluding them or putting them at the back of the bus as far as the money is concerned, maybe if they did receive those monies, maybe they get half a grant. You know, instead of getting 4,000, maybe those folks could qualify for 2. Because even some of these folks, some of the assistance they got, it wasn't a lot, especially when you look at the revenue that they've lost. You know, we talked about in these public comments about what the town could possibly lose, or what we thought the town could possibly lose in funding, federal funding, but at the same time, we're excluding a group of people who absolutely lost money just because they did receive some assistance from someplace else. So, you know, just a consideration there may be, instead of doing an exclusion, is we give them, you know, they could be eligible for 50% or 25% or whatever that number that council might think is reasonable. Just a thought that I had. Just trying to make this as fair to everybody as we can, so that after the fact, we're not hearing that we weren't fair with what we were doing. So that was my comments pretty much.
Mr. Mayor, going back to the 30 persons or less, why, I'm going to go along with Billy on that. Why do we have to have a limit on how many people that they employ?
We don't. We don't. It's completely your program. You can craft it any way you like.
Because I don't think there's a business really on here that you would consider big business. I mean, they're all small businesses. You may have some franchises, but they're still, they're still a smaller business. They still have their own individual budgets that they have to run.
I know some of these restaurants, just like you mentioned, are employing 40, 50 people. Rope Walk, AJ's, for example, I think they're somewhere in the 30 mark, 35, something like that mark, Don's and all that. I would entertain that, as far as eligibility, that we just eliminate how many people they got working for them. Mm-hmm. If you're a business and you're hurting, it doesn't make a difference if you got 2 people or if you got 20 or 40 working for you, you're hurting.
And we also, just one more thing, we also, because in the original draft, it had on here that restaurants that provided takeout delivery are eligible for a reduced grant amount. But if we took, that part was taken out, right? It's just restaurants in general, not if, okay, good deal.
It was decided to simplify it and just.
Yeah, because they provide an essential service, so I wouldn't want to see them penalized for trying to.
Let's not split hairs with it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
I will speak on the PPP EIDL. We did take that out of our draft, so we didn't exclude. We made sure that during our committee meeting, we just wanted them to indicate if they had received it, so they would be placed behind those that were unable to receive any of that.
The direction was to give a higher priority to those who had not received any assistance. Yeah, that was the direction. Maybe I didn't relate it correctly.
Okay.
I think that's a good point on the 30 persons. I was under understanding that was a carry through the county, a mandate through the county, but that's not. We should change that.
Yeah, that's why I called Rich today to make sure.
No, we should change that.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, on the exactly flip side of that, we make our people that clean vacation homes and stuff, they come have business license. You know what I'm saying? They have to have a business license. And they went 2 months. Now, a lot of them will be exempted because they took the $600 or they were able to get that, but those that weren't able to get it should certainly be eligible to themselves because they have to have a business license. They should definitely be able to apply.
Mr. Mayor and Mike and Gene, so if that's the case, then I think we also need to add in here, if we're going to consider EIDL and PPP, because most of those folks, under the new guidelines for unemployment that was put out through the CARES Act, if you're self-employed, you still can qualify for unemployment. So if they receive unemployment benefits, then they should have the same sanctions as a business does, where if they receive federal monies,
but if they didn't get it,
they will go to the back of the
bus.
bus.
If they didn't get it, they should be back to the front.
Yeah,
You know,
you'll find that is in here about unemployment.
Okay. I know it was on the Waterman, I didn't know it was on the small business.
Again,
Okay.
I apologize, I have not proofread this.
And I may not have seen it.
But it should be in here that if you've received unemployment benefits, you will.
But let's just go for instance, if that person made more than $178 a week, they didn't get it. You know what I'm saying? $179 a week doesn't make you a living. So what I'm saying is that poor young lady, might be a single mom or whatever, she made $179. She did not get that unemployment check or the $600. So I'm saying that person should definitely be in there. There's more than you think on this island. There's a lot, and they're made to get business license by the town. So that to me, they're still business people.
So one last question, and I
Yes.
promise I'll shut up after that. As far as the application, when we send it out, will there be anything as far as them proving or saying what their normal gross receipts were?
No.
Okay.
They have to basically, and we don't have a way of checking, of confirming the data.
Okay.
It's basically, you're on your honor, you will sign a statement just saying
Okay.
not being truthful.
Okay.
That's on the, and we did ask Waterman to provide their VNRC number, which is easy enough to check on.
Good enough.
And I did, I also had a talk with the staff at the county, by the way, and I should say, the staff at the county did an excellent job on this program. It's setting up the program and defining it. And we used a lot of what they created. But talking to the county today, I asked the staff, what pitfalls did you have? They've already done theirs, they've seen the applications. What am I looking for? What's going to jump out here at me? What problems am I going to have in qualifying them? And they gave me some helpful hints. And one of the things they said is they were able to check the NRC numbers very easily because they all have the same format. So.
Good deal. Good job.
Mr. Paul, how many business licenses are there on Chincoteague?
In excess of 1,200.
So we're gonna have a lot of business license holders that are not gonna be getting this money.
Correct.
So it's gonna, you know, we're not gonna be able to please everybody, even though the county hasn't had their applications. I can't see us, you know, there's no way we can give back to every business holder.
Now, one point, Mr. Mayor, for clarification on the business license, that includes all your individually registered rental homes, right?
That's correct.
Which they would go under the rental agencies, not make application
Individual
themselves.
rental homes by themselves would not be eligible.
Okay, so that would eliminate,
650
so that brings us down to what, 550 or something like that?
in that neighborhood.
Yep. So that's a lot more manageable number. Not that you're still going to help
It's
everybody,
by
but.
half, it's still a much larger number than we have grants available for.
Okay.
And I should also say that we've discussed this in the office in the last 2 days, and the suggestion was, and I think it's a good suggestion, was that we establish a committee which does not involve myself or the finance director to review the grants. More than one person, probably 4 people, department heads, that can review the grants and look at them objectively and then report to us. So that not 1 or 2 people are doing this, so that we get an even look by several people. So it eliminates some of the accusations that may fly in the face later on. And I'm not naive enough to think that we won't have a few.
Okay. So, on that note, I would like to appoint Mr. Bott and Ms. Bowden to that committee, because they are on the budget committee. Now, as far as the other 2 or 3, I'll leave that up to you all. I believe that should be. Any other discussion on it? Any other changes or amendments to what we presented?
You need a motion to move forward with this so we can,
Yes, we do.
I'll make a motion that we move forward with the CARES Act grant information with the elimination of the 30 persons or less as far as employees are concerned. I think we should just cut that out.
All righty, I have a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All righty, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All righty, item 13. Moving on to the reviewing the state of emergency. Mr. Rush?
Okay, so funding, obviously has been the big question. Councilman Bott, you brought that up last week. on the July 6th meeting. I have spoken with my contacts at FEMA, and more importantly, our grants liaison at the Grants Division concerning grant number DR4512-VA, which is the disaster grant for this particular COVID event. And the individual I deal with there, her name is Michelle Dashner. So I explained to Ms. Dashner that we had come out and terminated our state of emergency, and point blank, would we lose any funding for doing so? And she said no. The funding began immediately at 1400 or 2 p.m. on March 19th, so anything past that point we can claim. And even right now, if something were to happen or we had an expenditure that was related to COVID, we could certainly claim that. Now, Monday night, I told you that we had roughly 8,500. So what I did is I went through each department head, and I also had accounting go look at payroll, some of the receipts and so forth. And I can report to you today that 8,500 was a low number. We have spent, up to this point, $20,155.66 are our current COVID expenditures that have processed thus far. So that number could certainly go up. Based on that, if that entire figure were approved by FEMA in the PA process, we would receive reimbursement of $15,116.75. Now, we would be responsible for $5,038.92, which is again how the PA process works. It's used strictly for public assistance, and in this emergency, right now, Category B expenses, which covers emergency protective measures, things that we have bought, any overtime incurred, and there is some leeway now, and some of these figures are tracked in here, to put in admin. So for the department heads that got the figures for me, certainly we count that. We're able to count some of my hours into that as well, and some of our staff hours that were put into helping us get the PSAs out, tracking the cost. So again, that $20,000, please don't think that tonight that's our submittal, okay? Because it could be more, it could be less, but certainly when the PA process begins and FEMA sends their PA team in, they are going to go through each and every line and determine what's eligible and what's not. So in our due diligence, we're putting everything that looks like it is eligible in there, and of course FEMA will take it out. So clarifying with Ms. Dashner on this event, she stated that the event is no different than a hurricane event. So as soon as you declare that local emergency, your funding stream begins. Typically, we only stay in a state of emergency for a hurricane type event, a nor'easter, typically 3 to 7 days is typically what our state of emergencies do during a hurricane. Unfortunately, COVID is a different animal. We're still in the emergency. Okay, the emergency has not ended. The emergency is ongoing. So again, funding, just like in a hurricane, even though we're past 7 days, when we come out of our emergency, typically, we then continue to incur funding. Sandy, for example, Councilwoman Richardson, I know you brought that up. With Sandy, we had $1.7 million of vegetative debris, just vegetative debris that we put in to claim. And we all saw the piles of debris, the trucks that went by and so forth to pick all that up. So again, all that compounded after the emergency. So funding is not in jeopardy for this event. I want to be extremely clear on that. Funding is not in jeopardy. We have a clear answer on that. Now, the emergency is still going on, and I still stand by my statement last week that we still have an emergency here, and we should still be in a state of emergency for public safety purposes. Mr. Tolbert, if you would you please open the Situation library, please. Situation report library. Come down 2 more. Up, back up. All right, what you're seeing here, if you'll focus over here, this line here is the current emergency declaration status within the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is every agency, every county, town that has their own emergency management agency within the Commonwealth. Mr. Toller, would you scroll down for me, please? And I can stop at any time you want to read any of those, but I think you'll see where I'm going once we continue down the page. So if you notice there, terminated, that yellow box, is the first yellow box has finally popped up here in the town of Chincoteague. So the town of Chincoteague has terminated their emergency. We did not rescind. I do believe I used that terminology on the 6th. Rescinded means we don't have an emergency. Totally not true. We had and we still have an emergency. So we terminated our declaration. All right, and if you notice, you scroll down to Frederick County. Frederick County is up in the northwest corner of Commonwealth. So doing my due diligence, I called Frederick County, the EM person up there, and we had a nice lengthy discussion. And I asked him, why did you terminate in Frederick County? And his answer to me was, the board felt as though having a local emergency would potentially hurt them in their economy opening back up in Frederick County. So their board members did vote to come out and terminate their local emergency. Again, their funding is not in jeopardy because, again, funding is not in jeopardy based on the disaster response for 4512. So again, having that conversation, they came out feeling that their economy would be in jeopardy. So unfortunately, I was hoping to have something to bring back to you to kind of give you some more information to consider. Certainly our economy, if you look at this island since about the first part of June, thankfully it is starting to come back. Now we'll continue on down here and you'll notice declared, 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 declared. We're going to come up on a green box here before too long. Okay, so, all right, stop. So, Amherst County, it says none. That is a fallacy because I called Amherst County's EM and he's like, what? We have a state of emergency. So again, I was able to prove that by simply going over here, and Mr. Talbot, you don't have to do this, but if you hit view, you can look at all of their sit reps that are entered, just like any one of them that you do have out there. So they are in. There's different buttons on your sit rep, and they do not get pushed at the right time or the right thing comes up. Amherst County is still in a state of emergency, so that red or that green box should be red declared. Now Lee County has none. Okay, Lee County is right. They don't have and never have they had a declaration for this event. All right, Lee County is out in the mountains. They're fairly isolated. Okay, you could almost argue that they're similar to Chincoteague. The problem with Chincoteague though is we have a tourism industry. Lee County does not have a tourism industry. Lee County has coal mines. Lee County has a poor population, unfortunately. But Lee County never had an emergency, so therefore they never declared one. So Lee County has none. And Mr. Talbot, if you want to go ahead and scroll on down there. You can see the rest of the Commonwealth is still declared. Every locality is still declared. And again, the reason for that is COVID has not gone, right? And giving the message of COVID, you know, everything's A-okay, everything's, you know, open and ready to go, gives a message of complacency. And I know there have been some tough decisions. I know each and every one of you have received phone calls, letters, you know, about the situation since the very beginning. And I have a timeline that shows how we got to where we were at. But what I will say to get us started into any other further discussion is when you're dealing with an emergency is a beast all to itself. It's nice, we can sit in here, we can plan, we have air conditioning, we have lights. But when an emergency occurs, you have to react quickly. You have to take training, you have to take experience. Experience is big in emergencies. That's how you can react to the emergency, that's how you plan for the emergency. So when we look at emergencies, and any of the decisions, any of the recommendations for the decisions has been based on, you do the most good for the most people, okay? The most good for the most people. And unfortunately, sometimes that leaves somebody out. I'll use a bus accident, for example. You have a severe bus accident here on Chincoteague or here on the Causeway. We only have, limited resources at best. Our mutual aid resources come in. When you were to go out there and you see bodies laying everywhere, even though the ones that look like they are the most critical, the ones that might die in the next 5 minutes, you walk by those bodies because you're going to go to the ones that you know you can save. So again, that's the principle of doing the most good for the most people. And that's what we do in an emergency. That's how we plan. That's how we make our decisions. The other thing, again, I did say we need to be cautious because of finance. Again, I will say it again. Our finances are secure. Okay, our finances are secure in this. But I noticed a while ago we were talking about finances. We want to be cautious with our finances, and believe you me, we've all done that. Everyone has tried to do that. And I feel for the business owners. I know Mayor Leonard, and I know each one of you have felt for the business owners. In PSA number 4, Mayor Leonard went out to say, look, I know you folks wanted to shut the island down. We all heard about put the bridge up. All right, I know each one of us sitting here heard, let's put the bridge up. Couldn't do that. But if you go back to PSA number 4, PSA number 4 was, look, we're looking out for your safety. We're talking about it. But we don't want to shut these businesses down because the person that's serving the food, cooking the food, cleaning the rooms, we didn't want them to lose their livelihood. I mean, that was his decision. That was his thought process, and I know each of you thought that as well. There's no doubt in my mind that each one of those folks in the community, and even tonight, each one of those folks that live in our community is at the forefront of your thoughts and the reasons we're having these discussions. So again, I do show you that for the the vast majority of the Commonwealth, everyone is still declared in a state of emergency for COVID-19, okay? So I wanted to put that out there. Now, I do have a timeline via PowerPoint if we need to discuss it. If you have questions, you want to stop now, ask, or we move on from it. But that's, again, I know funding was the big question.
Any questions of Mr. Rush?
Yes,
All right.
several.
Denise, go ahead.
Of course, I wasn't here last Monday night, but Tuesday on my way home, Brian, I called you on the phone or texted you and asked you to call me, one or the other. And I asked you what this means, and you did tell me that all outdoor dining could cease. There's a possibility.
Okay.
That would have been in jeopardy?
So
Apparently that's...
Again, bear with me, and
Yeah.
let's answer one question at a time,
Yep.
if you don't mind.
no problem.
So, under outdoor dining,
Mhm.
that was certainly a question that we had because when we initially went into the outdoor dining to try to help these restaurants to get back open, we had said until the state of emergency ends. Well, when we, and Mr. Talbert helped craft this document, so when we all sat around, we talked, we got the document back out, and I know like every one of you, you read it 100 times, and finally 101 times you learn something new. In that document that allowed businesses to open, and again, that was from number 2 of the ABC requirement, that the licensee receives written approval for use of the temporary outside dining area from the locality where the business is located. That's how the free permit came about, so that they could engage and do such a thing. That was their written approval in case they were asked for it. So back to our guidance for that, the order actually was when the governor ends his state of emergency. So even coming out of our state of emergency, restaurants are not in jeopardy. Okay, they are not in jeopardy of losing that free permit that was issued to them.
All right, my next question is, I asked you what it means about funding, and you said the extra cleaning being done to the restrooms at different places will no longer be funded. I asked you about EMS providers, PPE supplies, things like that. Basically, the questions I asked you, at that time, you told me we were no longer gonna get reimbursed.
I said we were in jeopardy of not being reimbursed.
Okay.
So my clarification tonight is, we are still being able to be reimbursed
Okay.
for any cleaning, for anything that's set out there. Supplies, now supplies are a little different. If we order them and we receive them and we can get them, then yes, we can, use funding for that. However, the free supplies that we've been getting from FEMA, we now on these FEMA drops, because they use that chart, we go down through there and they say, oh, Chincoteague is no longer an emergency. We then will move backwards, and if there's any left, just like we spoke tonight about the CARES Act funding, then we'll get what's left. So we have been getting small amounts, certainly not large amounts, but we have been getting some small PPE drops throughout the event. Hand sanitizers, I know we ended up with 10 gallons of that, I believe. Masks, things like that. So that is still, because we're out of that emergency, we could still lag behind. Now, PPE, as far as purchasing PPE, the town has purchased very little PPE. Most of the PPE usage was with the police department and then with my staff. The Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company purchased all the PPE. Luckily, we had a lot on hand in the beginning, and when we saw this becoming a problem, we were able to get more. Now, everything is back ordered. We're not getting anything right now. And there's a huge usage, coming. Every now and then we'll find a supplier somewhere that we can get a small amount, but here again, trying to be financially responsible for the fire company, people that have it certainly want to get top dollar for it, unfortunately.
Right.
So Brian, just as far as the FEMA drops, because this is the first thing I've heard about FEMA drops even being discussed with all this. As far as the PPE, does that come in the FEMA drops too, or is that separate? Do they normally drop it?
Some
Okay.
PPE's coming in, and it's different every day. We'll get a phone call about 3 days ahead of time, and they look at our burn rates, and they go, okay, you're using 6 masks a day.
Okay.
And they'll look at that and they'll say, oh, you'll get this and this in the next drop.
Okay.
Sometimes we get gallons, sometimes we get N95 there's no rhyme or reason, and I think maybe that could be a little better organized at the federal level, but hey, we're doing it.
What is the benefit, or what would have been the benefit of coming out of the state of emergency? Is there any benefit to coming out of it?
So no, there, in my opinion, in my recommendation, there is no benefit of coming out of the state of emergency. It gives a negative impression that the emergency is over. It may lead to complacency. And with the actions of the governor yesterday, certainly it's going to, I won't say it will handicap our police department, and Police Chief Fisher, feel free to chime in, but the Department of Health now has been supercharged by the governor to make sure that they go out to hotels, motels, restaurants, swimming pools, and if you're not wearing one of these, or you're doing something you're not supposed to, they in fact could lose their permits, their licenses, and so forth. Now, the businesses that do not fall under the Department of Health, they were instructed to call their local police department for a no trespass. So here locally, our retail businesses, they would have to go out, call Chief Fisher's department, and they would have to be trespassed. Having that, again, not that he can't do it under the governor's order. Please understand me completely. I want everybody to understand. He can still go out and do it under the governor's order. But again, having that local declaration, it says, hey, we're still in emergency, folks. We have a problem here on Chincoteague. And granted, today's numbers, we're still at 10. Still at 10. All right, which is amazing, given the fact that everybody else is rising. Okay, amazing. And I want to make sure I'm right on this, but we've had 211 persons tested. Okay, 211 tested. So certainly, there have been some people that have gotten a test. In today's numbers, we only went up one more shorewide, which is again amazing compared to some of our neighboring localities. I said this last week and I'll say it again. The actions that were taken from the very beginning to try to keep this community safe is why we are where we are today. And I believe that wholeheartedly, and I stand by that. There were some very difficult decisions that had to be made. And you know, I hope we never have to go back and make those decisions again. But again, I stand by the recommendations that were given to make those decisions.
If we were to go back into the state of emergency now, what happens? Are we put, and you may have answered this, are we put at the back of the line for funding or?
So, you know, you have to look at that, and I would be speculating if I gave you an answer on that. But one would speculate that, you know, well, wait a minute, what are they doing? Are they having an emergency? Are they not having an emergency? You know, what's going on here? So, again, I would rather err on the side of caution myself and say, look, we have an emergency here in the town of Chincoteague, okay? We have a local emergency. It doesn't affect anything else that we're doing. Operations, just like tonight, talking about the other projects, the other fundings, we still go on as we are, as a community. But it does make us better prepared if, God forbid, we end up like Virginia Beach. We end up like Ocean City starting to have some problems, okay? Do I think that'll happen? I hope not. But is it possible? It's highly possible. So again, when we have that state of emergency, it changes things, okay? And I know that we had some discussion on that, but procurement is a huge thing. We don't have to come up with contracts and bids and things like that. If we need to go out tomorrow because we've had a huge outbreak, if we can find the PPE, guess what? We can get it, all right? We might have to pay for it, but again, it's going to be reimbursable, all right? And it would be reimbursable under, again, not being in the emergency. However, we're going to have to go through the procurement routes in order to get that. It's just going to slow us down.
Okay. I got one more question for Brian. Brian, how long have you been the emergency operations coordinator for the town?
Okay, I started with the town of Chincoteague June 18th of 1990, and I was appointed the emergency management coordinator the October meeting of 2004. So that would be almost 16 years.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for him.
All right.
I do have more, but
yeah, I'll get to you in a second. My next question, I'm going to need the chief and you up here. Because one of my concerns is, you can sit it, not that chief, fire chief.
Too many chiefs in the room.
Should have said last name, chief last name.
Here, clean yourself.
Just don't touch. If, for instance, his example of a bus crash, and we've had several crashes over on the causeway, and members of our fire company were infected, is the fire company in a position to pay for any of their hospitalization? Of course, insurance would take care of that. But if they had to quarantine somewhere, and they wouldn't want to quarantine at home because they would infect the rest of the family, is the fire company going to be able to pay for quarantining them? I mean, how would we have to go through that procurement program to do that? If the town were to pay for that, would we have to try to get contracts? Would we have to try to get, you know, all that menagerie of stuff we have to do because we're not in the emergency declaration?
So that was gonna be one of my starting points on this, is because I knew when we come out, that was a big worry for me. First thing, and I contacted a few members of council and everything, because I felt that what should have happened first was we should have had a workshop on it. Everybody should have, in this room, before we even come out of the state of emergency, you should have met all the heads of the departments. The fire department's probably got the biggest hand in this right now than anybody here on this island. And we weren't being told anything, like we're coming out of this. So my first question was, it's no different than a cardiac arrest. Somebody could have a cardiac arrest right there. And I've got 5 to 10 fire and EMS personnel that's gonna start working that patient. That patient has COVID. what am I gonna do with them people? And that was my question. I asked him, I asked members of council as well, who's gonna take care of this? Because under the state of mercy, that was my first thing was, if I know I'm under state mercy, I know we're getting reimbursement back from the state, 75%, correct? Usually that's how it goes.
If it's approved, and
If it's
again,
approved.
you still will, right this minute, reimbursement is available.
As well. But at that time, I had that question, and nobody had answers. So that's why I said a lot of times, I wish we went through a workshop instead of going through the motions first and then asking all the questions afterwards. Because it put us in a position like, right now, we know how our year's gonna be. We've already canceled our carnival this year, we've already canceled Pony Swim, which affects the whole island. And, you know, and it's like, we're sitting there watching our dollars just like Mike's talking earlier when you were talking about projects that you have. So we've got projects too that we're like, we need this done, but we can't do it. So we're watching our funds, so right now, we're sitting there looking, if we have to upfront any money, you know, we're gonna be scared to do what we have to do. We have a new building. We have payments. And that's something that we haven't had in a very long time on a building. So all these questions arise, and I didn't have answers. So that scared me. What are we gonna do? I know I got reassurance saying the town's gonna help us out if something happens, but we don't know where the town's gonna be at either. And I addressed that and mentioned that to a couple people, because you don't know what your revenues are. So I guess next time, and this was what I was gonna ask council and everybody, was like, before we even start this phase or anything, you need to get everybody, all the heads and all the departments together, sit in a room and discuss it, because that's what should happen. And I wish it did happen. And then that way, it would look better on everybody in here. It would look better on the whole council as a whole, because then that way you would have been able to discuss it and everything else, along with it, fire department, police department, everybody, emergency services director. I mean, we could have covered everything and answered a lot of questions. And it would look a bit better if, you know, because I can understand, y'all want to get back and run the local government. I understand that wholeheartedly, but I wish we had the answers beforehand, you know, and that's the only thing that I asked of you.
So, Mr. Mayor, while Bobby's still up here, you know, I agree with you, Bobby. And I think something that Chris Bott had brought up, and I actually put it in a letter that I wrote to the town in April, was to form a recovery team to work with the town to, you know, not only exit this program, but to go through recovery with the businesses, with the private citizens, the whole 9 yards. And that wasn't done, and I agree with you. If we had a situation like that where there was a team where we could involve the fire department, you know, involve the local businesses, things of that nature, it would have gone a whole lot smoother. And I think we've learned for, you know, situations in the future. It doesn't work for a hurricane because, like Brian said, you're 3 to 7 days. So it's not worth, you know, forming a team. The other question I have, Brian, now, as far to Bobby's point about the CBFC, you know, having a quarantine, wasn't the motel that was on the other side of the Coast Guard station, and forgive me, I cannot think of the name now, they're that new motel down there. Weren't they set up as an as a staging area, evacuation center, quarantine area for patients?
Or nurses or anything.
Right.
They were,
things-
it was in the newspaper.
So couldn't we have used that, couldn't we have utilized that for the CBFC if we had to, if we had no other alternatives?
So we did, and we came very close to having to enact that plan.
Okay.
We were trying to use a facility that had outdoor access, so you didn't have to go down a long hallway.
Right.
Because they were gonna have to be put up for 14 days, we were gonna have to feed them, we were gonna have to provide them with every provisions. I had 3 staff members, including myself, that were within a half an hour of getting that phone call to go quarantine. Thankfully, it didn't come out to that, but it was close. So yes, we were close to doing that. Yes, I do believe that they were set up to do something like that. However, that was not the ideal location for our folks, certainly, because you do have to supply. When you put people up for 14 days, 10 days, whatever the case may be, you have to take them food,
Right.
snacks, you know, puzzle books, whatever it takes to keep them sane.
But it was something we could have used if we had to.
We can use that,
Okay.
and we were prepared
Okay.
to enact a plan to actually quarantine our folks, yes.
And is it the case now, where we are trying to rent rooms on the roof, so to speak, because of our visitation? Are they still offering that service?
So I don't know if they're offering that service or not. I, again, would recommend against using that facility simply because they're not set up to do a proper quarantine. They're not, because you have to access the building through a common area. You have to go down a common indoor hallway. and they do not have the negative pressure set up to deal with things like that. So again, I would recommend using our facilities on here, our hotels, motels, primarily our motels, with ground floor outside access. So you eliminate that. We will be responsible for any cleaning that comes about. So we would need to get a contract with ServPro or with Royal Plus. And again, you know, there's probably others that we could go and get a contract, but they would have to come in, do the cleaning. After we were done with it, return it to a normal state until we could either use it for another quarantine or release it back. The problem and concern that I would have right now doing that is I would hate to ask these localities, these businesses in our locality, hey, yeah, we need to get a room from you, and of course we're going to pay whatever the going rate is. But I would much rather see that family get that room that wants to come and go out and use our restaurants, use, you know, some of the activities that they have here, see some of our local businesses. So again, I want to do everything I can to keep not only our citizenry, our businesses safe, but also the visitors that come here. That's top goal, been top goal all along, and I know each one of you, that's your top goal. So.
Brian, did one of our local hotels put up a couple of our EMS providers in the last couple of weeks?
They have.
And that reason was because of?
That was actually because of a building malfunction with the HVAC system, and it was not safe for them to stay in that area. So yes, and do you mind if I say who it was? The Waterside Motor Inn graciously, Ms. Donna, Mr. Tommy, offered to put the folks up, and they would have done it for many, many days.
Right.
And would you like to elaborate on that?
So far, they won't take anything from us, neither. So the department didn't want to do that.
Okay.
So, and I know our business owners. I know
Right.
them. They're
Right.
about this community, and they'll do anything. I know if we ask them, they're going to do it.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind.
I just want that, so that was not COVID
That was
related
not
as to why they were there.
COVID-related, no, thankfully.
Another avenue too is, I mean, just because they have cooking facilities would make it easier for people with that are being quarantined. It's just like the cottages and things like that, because you have the same accommodations as a hotel, motel. It's ground floor, and then you would have all the cooking facilities as well, so that could possibly be an avenue. Okay.
Any further questions of Mr. Rush and Mr. Lappin? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Bowden, since you were not here for the last meeting, I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay. Bear with me, and, because I got a lot of material here, and to use Miss Ellen's words, and ones we've used here tonight and everything, a few things I'm going to say is going to give some people some heartburn. And it is what it is. I was out of town, I was on vacation, watching the news when all this COVID mess, as we call it around here, this mess, started. I was watching the news every night, and at the time, Washington State was the hot spot. So I came home on March the 2nd, 3rd, something like that. And on March the 12th, seemed like the whole country come to a standstill, with the president declaring state of emergency, the governor, and then down to us on March the 19th. And on March the 19th, 2020, here's the proclamation, declaration of a local state of emergency with everyone's signature that's on council, excluding Mr. McComb because he was not on council at the time. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here does exclude Billy because he was not on council at the time. So here's where we declared a state of emergency here in this town. The Code of Virginia, the town of Shingatig at 44-146.21, Declaration of Local Emergency. A local emergency may be declared by the local director of emergency management with the consent of the governing body of the political division. Well, that's us. We're the governing body of this political division here. And it was declared. On April the 6th, at one of our town meetings, our regular meeting, Councilman Taylor encouraged everyone to stay safe and look out for one another. He added that there are people that are scared and young families that are hurting, and again asked everyone to look out for one another and keep them in your prayers. On April the 6th, the same meeting, Councilman Bott commended Mayor Leonard for making the tough decisions in the state of emergency. He feels he is doing a fine job and encouraged Mayor Leonard to keep it up. He explained that we need to study these things that are reaching the peak. He advised that it isn't the same across the board. He stated that Pennsylvania's peak is a matter of weeks and the town's peak is 30+ days from now, and he feels that we need to keep an eye on this. Everything I'm reading from you is straight from the town minutes. On May the 4th, Emergency Service Director Rush reviewed the disaster laws in the Commonwealth. He stated that as they reviewed this, they discussed it with legal counsel. He referred to the declaration of local emergency and the ratification. This also allows the town to put in for funding. The funding is typically for emergency protective measures up to 75%, which is up to FEMA. They are submitting and prepared to submit anything that can be reimbursed. When FEMA begins to conduct the audit, some things may get 75% and some things may not. Once a local emergency is declared, at that point, allows the Director of Emergency Management, which is the mayor, to restrict commodities, change roles, come up with emergency ordinances in order to keep the public safe. Typically, those orders have been stay put, curfew, evacuation of non-residents, and such. He continued that in this event has become widespread, they have restricted movements and they have asked people not to travel here. That was May 4th, 2020. Also on May 4th, 2020, Councilman Taylor stated that Emergency Service Director Rush and Mayor Leonard have done a tremendous job. He referred to the code of 44-146-21 verbiage, which states consent of the governing body, confirmation of the governing body, the government body, and its judgment. He stated they would like a little bit more input on decisions. He again feels they've done a tremendous job and he is not complaining whatsoever. On May the 4th, again, Emergency Service Director Rush advised that they would have to rescind the declaration of local emergency, which would take a vote of council. Once they got into the recovery phases, less operational and more recovery is when they would want to do this. They don't want to jeopardize any federal funding. There would then be a means to rescind. That was May 4th. On May 4th, Councilman Bott stated that the current council doesn't have ultimate governance over this COVID-19 crisis. He asked how long they will stay in this type of governance during the state of emergency. The state code says they make the decision to come out of the state of emergency. He asked how this would work so they could get back to the council governance. Emergency Service Director Rush advised that they would have to rescind the declaration of local emergency, which would take a vote of council. Once they got into the recovery phase, less operational and more recovery, then they would want to do this. Again, they don't want to jeopardize federal funding. Councilman Bott asked if they have started any form of local recovery to get things back on track, or is this going to be on the state's backbone? Emergency Director Rush stated that when you declared the local state of emergency on March 19th, you consented to the declaration of emergency. Council has had input all along through the different meetings and discussions they've held. He added that each council member has had a share in this. He stated when it comes down to it, it falls on the mayor's shoulders. Each of you have the responsibility to speak up. The hours of planning and talk and every idea that has been proposed has been vetted multiple times. May 21st. Discussion continued and Mayor Leonard stated that one of the drawbacks would be having council meet, which requires a 3-day public notification. However, emergency management can meet day to day without notification. He also added that this also affects FEMA money. Councilman Bott reported that the town of Anacott is meeting regularly without notification under the state of emergency, and they read the statute allows them to do that. He also stated that under the state of emergency the town is under, the state government is under the state government for funding. He suggested that someone research it. He would like legal clarification. Town Manager Talbert stated that they have an attorney that they've used previously and he will contact them. He added that the VML attorney advised that we are sound and the decisions that we have made to date can be defended. He will contact the same attorney with the extra questions. May 21st, review the state of emergency executive order EO1 amended. Mayor Leonard advised that this weekend the hotels will be at 50% and everything else stays the same. He asked for questions from council. There was a lengthy discussion about requiring masks and being more restrictive than the governor and if the town's orders are legal. There were also comments about hiring a town attorney for legal advice. Mayor Leonard responded that the VML attorney reviewed our order and advised that the town was indeed in compliance. May 21st, Councilman Bott feels that everyone in the community is really trying and taking this seriously by wearing masks and practicing social distancing. He gave kudos to everyone in the town for complying. Councilman Reed understands that this bothers everyone. He feels they should take heed and do what the orders say. He encouraged everyone to hang with it and do the best he can. He is bothered about how bad the businesses are hurting. June 1st. Mayor Leonard advised that although he would like to come out of the state of emergency, he stated that if the cases go up, the town would be back at square one. He added that there is no intent for control. It was done to track expenditures, which is what the state emergency is for. Emergency Management Coordinator Rush advised under the state of emergency, there are a lot of moving parts for FEMA's reimbursement. The reimbursements of up to 75% of the expenses. He feels it would be irresponsible for the town to come out of the state of emergency at this time. The town business can continue to run, and they should stay in the state of emergency for a short period of time. They are still in response mode and response recovery mode. He commended staff for doing a great job of responding and filtering many calls and giving out information. He suggested staying in the state of emergency at least halfway through phase 2 as it gives the mechanism of reimbursement. Councilman Bott asked if the state of emergency if the state was still under the state of emergency, and Mr. Rush responded that the state is. He explained that this allows for reimbursement of funds, also gives access to other resources. The town will receive reimbursements while they're still in it, but it is questionable if they come out. He advised that Northampton County, Accomack County, and Chincoteague are in a state of emergency. The Code of Virginia lists Chincoteague because it has its own emergency services as a declaration of a state of emergency during an event. Now, with all that being said, one of the things that I've heard over the last week and a half since the last meeting was that most people had an issue about communication with the mayor. I have to disagree with that. There has not been one time that I've not been able to contact this man, whether it was through a text message, a phone call, email, or calling the office and saying, hey, will you call me? I've also got a problem with that I don't think that council's vote last week was so much about coming out of the state of emergency, but about some control issues, some power issues. I'm upset that this vote seemed to be determined ahead of time. Ex parte, that was mentioned just a little while ago, basically means with respect to or in the interest of one side only. Ex parte, it's unethical. One councilman was overheard at a local store on the phone talking to someone saying that he had the votes. He had the 4 votes that he needed to come out of the state of emergency. We as council often discuss things with each other. I know myself, I ask for opinions or understandings, but I would never come out and ask for a vote from either one of you. It should not be you scratch your back and I'll scratch mine, or I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine. It's dirty politics and it has no business here. This seemed like an obvious power grab to indeed tie the hands of our mayor, who was elected accordingly to fulfill his duties as such. At the time I was vice mayor, this would have put me next in line to fulfill those duties if Arthur couldn't. I know I certainly wouldn't have wanted my hands tied when it came down to the protection of this island. And Chris, love your heart, I hope you're not put in that position either. We were elected to these seats because the people here, out here, standing here, out there listening, had the faith in us to make the decision for the betterment on their behalf, not ours. We are put in these seats to serve them, not to serve ourselves. And that vote seems certainly like it was on our behalf and not theirs. One person wrote to me to say that she received a response from one council member who said that Arthur lost decorum of the meeting and that the case to end the SOE, state of emergency, was not able to be explained. I personally watched that meeting myself, and Arthur asked several times for council to explain why they wanted to come out of it, and nobody could say a thing. Only one councilman sat there repeatedly and said, I have a motion and a second and I want to take the vote. How can you not discuss or explain when the mayor, the leader of the town, asks you to do so? My other big thing is, how in the world can you not take the advice of your emergency operations coordinator? That man has been in that place, and that's why I asked you how long you've been in that position, since 2004. That's like going to Robbie or Mike for their professional advice and then saying, don't need them. Well, if that's the case, if we're not going to listen to this man right here who has been involved in emergency services for however many years now, then you might as well pack up and go home. That's the way I feel about it. We got a professional here who has done this more times than he can count. We are at a different place in life. We're not dealing with the hurricane. We're not dealing with some other kind of natural disaster. We're dealing with a pandemic, and whether you want to call it that or not, whether you believe it's a hoax, whether you believe it's going to go away after the election, it doesn't really matter, because we have to deal with it because it's here. Police at the foot of the bridge, they never stopped anybody from coming on this island. They only handed out information. That did not hurt a thing. Robbie, I know that you were not real thrilled about that, but you did it. They also handed out a flyer on a missing person. That didn't hurt a thing. That outcome did not, come out the way that everybody had hoped it did, but information was put out there. All I ask from you all that voted to come out of it is a reason why, a valid reason why to come out of it. After each meeting that the EOC had, Brian Rush emailed every council member to inform them of the decisions that were made. Every one of us. Did any one of you contact him or the mayor to express your concern over the decisions made? That's a question I'd like answered. Every single day we got an update from Brian. Every single day on the COVID issues, even on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, we got emails from Brian telling us numbers were up, numbers were down, what's going on, what the weather forecast was, everything. Did any of you ever have any questions to ask him about those updates, or him or the mayor over concerns about the information they gave us? There's been some talk from council that the mayor is not accessible. If you can't get him by phone or text, call the town office and staff and say you need to get a hold of him. Again, I'll say it. I've never had an issue with trying to get a hold of Arthur Leonard. Have you and I had issues about communication before? Yes, we have. You and I had a good, I won't call it a knockdown drag out, but him and I had a right good darn discussion going on over the phone about communication. And I asked him Not about communication between us, but for him to communicate better with the constituents out there. And after that, I feel like he got much better as time went on. The bottom line here is, boys and ladies, and I'm not referring to you because your vote was to stay in. All of us, you, Robbie, Brian, all of us, Bobby back there, we grew up here. We know each other. We know our families. Everybody's sitting at this table is from here, except Miss Ellen. But you've been here so long that, you've been here longer than all of us. You know, I don't know of one of us out here who doesn't love each other, think about each other, hurt when our families are hurting, hurt when our kids are hurting, hurt when our lives are being disrupted. There's not one time, and anybody in this room here can attest, as soon as something is wrong with somebody, we flock to that person like white on rice because we want to be there to help them. None of us up here have an easy job to do, and we all have our own ideas and opinions, and we all agree that we can't please all the people all of the time. It's not going to happen. You know, I've called, you know, Matt from time to time on advice about construction work. I've talked to Gene Wayne about septic work. Chris about 10 million pills now that I'm 51 that I have to take every day now. Billy and I go way back since we came out of the birth canal. This lady right here drove me around on a school bus. You know, the bottom line is we're all here together. We have to do this together. But we're not here up here at this table to serve ourselves. It's those people out there that are counting on us to serve them, protect them, to govern them, and most of all, to listen to them. And if we can't do that, then we need to get up out of these seats and let somebody else come sit here. For me, this has been a very hurtful event because I feel like, and you've seen it in the letters we've gotten from people that have been emailed. Mike only read a handful of them. The letters we've been getting from people, you know, they all felt blindsided. And I know Arthur felt blindsided the other, you know, last week. He had to. Mike told me out of his own mouth he felt blindsided. I know you were. I could tell it just by looking at your face, looking at the meeting. You have done this town a disservice by coming out of the state of emergency. And it doesn't just come down to, you know, funding or anything like that, but it comes down to the protection of the people that live here and visit here, and it also comes down to the protection of us governing this town.
Mr. Mayor.
I ask
I'm
that
sorry.
you,
I'm sorry.
I ask that you all please reconsider to either rescind coming out of the state of emergency or go and vote to go back in it. Because, you know, that man right there, I trust him with my life. If I fell out with a heart attack right now, I think every one of us in here would want him on us. I know I would. I've asked him for advice several times. I've asked him for numbers several times. I've asked him for information. And that man right there, who is our professional in this town, hired by this town to be our emergency operations coordinator, should be the bottom line of it. And if we can't take his advice, then whose can we take? I'm off my soapbox. I'm looking at every one of you. I'm going to just say it like this. I love every one of you. Think the world of every one of you. But this should have never occurred the way it occurred. Bobby was right. Maybe this should have been talked about beforehand, you know, with everybody involved and not just a few. And I'm sorry if I've hurt anyone's feelings. It's not my intention. Not my intention to hurt this community or anything like that. But this vote right here should have never taken place the way it took place. We're all here together to take care of those people out there. And that's what it comes down to. Thank you.
Mr.
I'm
Mayor.
done.
Yes, Gene Lee.
Yeah, I have a compromise that I will put into the form of a motion in a minute. But, and Denise, I'll give you all the time you want on that. You were talking about, somebody said that they wanted to come out of the emergency, state of emergency midway between phase 2, and we came out of it in phase 3.
Right.
Who was it that said that?
That was myself she was referencing.
Okay.
Brian said that.
At that time, based on what we were seeing, I said we shouldn't come out. I believe the question was asked by Councilman Bott, if I'm not mistaken. I said I would not recommend coming out for at least the middle of phase 2. There's been other conversation with the mayor and also with Mr. Tolbert, because I had revised that statement that we should not even consider this before phase 3. And then after we started seeing the data and what was happening, you know, I rescinded that statement as well. But that was myself that said we could come out in the middle of phase 2, or at least not consider it before the middle of phase 2.
One more thing I'd like to add, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. You can sit down, you don't have to back up, it's fine. On the 14th, there were 5,700 more cases in Virginia. Hampton Roads, which is 2 hours away, saw an increase in cases of 146% since July the 6th. It's close, people. It's not, you know, it's not out just out in, you know, and we've had so many people here in the last couple weeks. Thank goodness they've been here for businesses. But you don't know. You know, Brian, I mean, in the next couple weeks, our numbers could go sky high. We don't know that.
You could start to see that tomorrow, your numbers going up. And I've said that all along, because there's no rhyme or reason. And again, there's nothing that we have to base it on. We have strictly these models that, especially UVA is the one we're using a lot in Virginia, that were showing when we were going to peak. And if you remember correctly, the local emergency managers of the shore, Northampton, Accomack, and myself, we had kind of come up with some data that said, hey, that first week in May is when you're going to see our peak. And we hit it. We hit those peak numbers. Unfortunately, you know, we were not seeing the reports here early like I wish we were to confirm that we only had 1 or 2 cases. Matter of fact, our first case on the shore, again, was on March the 19th. Not on Chincoteague, but on the shore. Because that was the day then, hey, we do have a COVID case on the eastern shore of Virginia. Mr. Mayor, I would recommend that we declare a local state of emergency. Was my exact. And you're correct. From the period of July 6th through July the 13th, the Hampton Roads region had an increase of 146% in positive COVID cases. Now, most of those, not all of them, but most of those cases were in the younger population, the less than 40 population. So you can speculate there as to, well, why is it running through that age group? But it doesn't matter. Those folks are still in the community there, still potential to spread it. We have that potential here. Another potential that we have, and again, we're a small body here within the town of Chincoteague. You know, our water department, public works takes care of those things, our police department, and our EMS. If 1 or 2 of our employees were to even get a contact tracing from the health department, and what employees they may have been around, we could lose half of our staff in a matter of an hour. And again, in my department, we come close to losing 3 people to a quarantine. Now, certainly myself, you know, I could have continued working as far as this goes, but we definitely would have lost 2 staff members off the truck. So, you know, we need to keep all that in mind as well. And I'll say it again, everything that had been done and has been done up to this point was with public safety in mind, and it worked. Our numbers prove it. If you look at other areas, our numbers proved it. People wanted to come here in droves because they wanted to get out of New York City. They wanted to get out of New Jersey at the time. And I don't blame them. I would have too. If I had an option and my family, I needed to get them out, I would have took them. I'd have took them to the middle of Kansas if it would have made them safe. So again, a lot of the things that happened, I know it wasn't easy for some of the businesses to go through that. It wasn't easy to make those recommendations for those businesses to go through that. But we had to keep this community safe.
Arthur, I need to ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
At one point, either in a budget meeting or Chris was there, so it must have been a budget meeting. We had talked about a recovery committee, and I don't know who all else was there, but I remember pointing to him, saying, he's the man. You know, so you did try to implement some kind of recovery committee.
Right, well, when it first started out, and the recovery committee was supposed to be about reopening.
Right, you're right.
And the reopening did it without a committee. You know, what I was seeing was the businesses reopening. We had the restaurant being able to open up outdoor seating. That wasn't done by us, that was done by the governor. So I thought that would be enough. I didn't think the town needed to work on reopening. It was reopening without us.
Right, right.
So why bog that down with more red tape and meetings and whatnot?
You are correct. I was not thinking just a second about the reopening of businesses.
Right.
I think where the loss of communication here was though, it wasn't, recovery is a lot further than reopening, because we are not recovered. This economy won't be recovered for years. And that's something that, you know, like when I put it in my comments that I wrote in about, you know, we need to capitalize on things like the off seasons and things like that to get revenue in here for these folks, you know, whatever that may look like. So that was my point. And so I think what you have here is like, it's almost like a misinterpretation of terms where one group's looking at reopen, one group's looking at recovery, and they're kind of different. Because, you know, they're two different things.
Well, boys and ladies, I have to ask you again to reconsider.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a compromise if you want to listen to it.
Hit it.
Okay. I would say we would go back into the state of emergency with the council included in all decisions in the standard governing way.
With Rush, is that a workable thing? Now, I know in the code, that's not covered, but, and I would need clarification on that with, the town, because in the way it's set up, this is my belief, the way it's set up with emergency operations, no notice would have to be given. We can work without the public. If we were to have full council at our meetings, we would have to have public involvement.
Something that Councilwoman Bagley touched on earlier, there was a request to find out the legalities of having a meeting without giving the typical 3-day notice, a special meeting. I did contact the DML lawyer, the one that we had used before. I did pose that question to him as well as another one, and he consulted several lawyers in his group that were had a high degree of expertise in municipal government, and he said that because of this particular state of emergency, where decisions, where it is not impossible for you to meet in the same room, that you were required to give the notice. Even in the state of emergency, you were required to give notice if you were going to have a full council meeting. It's not, he made the distinction of this state of emergency as opposed to a 3 to 5 day hurricane where there's no contact, you can't get a hold of each other, there's no communication, that sort of thing. He said in this particular type of state of emergency, it's their opinion that we would still have to give a 3-day notice in order to have a full council meeting, or, as you know, more than 2 of you in the same room at the same time discussing business.
Okay, so we would have to give notice. We would have to have
public, it would be a public meeting. Now,
It would be a public
now
meeting.
you solve the public meeting part of this. If you can't meet in the same room, and you see here we're social distance, you can't have a lot of folks here, people at the hallway and everything. The electronic meeting, you did a resolution to allow electronic meetings, and that's perfectly legal. But it was the opinion of the council, I consulted, that in order to give a meeting of the full council, you were required to do the 3-day notice. Okay? You couldn't call it within a matter of hours, and all meet either Zoom or in person.
Okay.
So what about this? What about, we've already got 2 scheduled council meetings a month because you have recess on the meeting we're on Thursday. You have the regular council meetings on Monday, first Monday of every month unless it's a holiday.
Right.
So why couldn't we just go ahead, if we compromise, you know, if this is what the council wants to do, why couldn't we just go ahead and put 2 special council meetings on the books for the other couple Thursdays? That way we'd have a stated time, we can use the same electronic system that we're using tonight for everybody to see. And if a decision is made that the council doesn't agree with, then that would be the time that we could talk about it and necessary, vote on it, to take further to take additional action or different action.
I'm not aware of any reason why you can't cancel a meeting that you scheduled without going through a 3-day notice for cancellation.
No, I'm not saying can't, I'm not
I
saying
know what
can't.
you're saying. You're saying put them on the books, and if you don't need to meet.
No, I mean, I'm fine with meeting, you know, if all we need to do is get an update from Brian in person and go home, then that's what we do. But we would have an update from Brian in every meeting, you know, letting us know what's going on, and reviewing any decisions that were made that week.
Which for me goes back to, we got an update every day from that man. Every day.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
All right, every day we got an update.
And after every meeting that we had, if we took any action, he sent out a briefing to the entire council. And council could have looked at that briefing and contacted Mr. Rush, Mr. West, or Mr. Talbert, or myself. So council had the ability at that time to have interaction. And this motion, you know, yes, it goes back into the emergency, but it doesn't really change anything. We would still have emergency meetings with the 4 of us, myself, Mr. Rush, Chief Fisher, and Mr. Talbert.
Well, I disagree, Mayor. Like you say, if you decide you won't close down, if we were still in the emergency, state of emergency, you could close down the motels tomorrow without saying anything to us. And that's just what you just said. Sure. I mean, I think we want a say in that. You can have police at our,
And that's what I'm
if we
saying.
were still in, you can't do it right now, but if we were still in it and you wanted to post the police at the bridge tomorrow, you don't have to say a word to us, and all it is your words. That's what we just want some say in that. Closing up motels in people's homes, not allowing people to go to their own homes that are come from another state, that wasn't the governor. That was the town of Chincoteague.
Correction. We did not close anyone's homes. If someone had a second home on Chincoteague, they had the right to come to their property. All we simply did was ask them not to come to think of us. Most of those homeowners did. We did have second homeowners come in.
We sure did.
So don't say that we shut them out.
But
Yes.
you just said.
Whoa! My time. We did. I did. Shut down hotels, campgrounds, and rental property because of the fact that most of our visitors were coming from areas that were infected. I myself was affected by that closure, owning a hotel. And I'm still dealing with the effects of closing my own hotel down. So that decision was not made lightly, or just because I had that power. I was looking out for the citizens of Chincoteague. So don't say, you know, that was a decision that you guys wanted to chime in on. You had the ability to chime in on that. After we made the decision, we sent that out. Nobody called me and said, hey, I don't think that was a good idea. Nobody. Everybody thought it was a good idea at the time.
So you don't want the council to have any say in the,
I'm
if we go
saying-
back in? That's a
I'm
question, it's an
saying,
easy
Gene
question,
Wayne,
it's an easy
I'm
question.
saying, Gene Wayne,
If you don't want it, you don't want it.
You have the ability to call me anytime. Anytime you want to. You can pick up your phone and dial my phone number. At any time. I've been in contact with citizens of Chincoteague. I've been in contact with, members of the staff. Anybody and everybody can call my cell phone.
But what you're saying is, if you're done talking, is you're not willing to go back in the state of emergency, which you said you want to go back in, which Brian said he want to go back in, with the council having a say in this decision. You're not willing to do that. If you're not willing to do that, I'll rescind my my compromise, and I won't be making a motion.
If you want to go back in the state of emergency, sure. I'm not going to deny you that.
No, but with the council being able to be included in all the decisions and the standard governing way.
Decisions is going to be the problem, Gene, because when you are in an emergency management, now if you don't want to take my view, take the emergency management manager. Take his word for it. He's been at the job since 2004. If his word isn't good enough for you, nobody is. It is hard for us as a committee to have to make a decision. Then contact all you all and have you chime in and make our decision, have to come back in and work out our decision. So what it makes us do is come in here and second guess ourselves. What's the council gonna say? Well, what do we gotta do? What do we gotta, it's gonna be hard for us to make an emergency management decision if we're gonna be second guessed. That's my only.
I'm not even saying
reserve.
second guess. We do it together. That is what I'm saying. Do it together. Not second guessing you. We do it together. We make decisions together. If you think we need to shut down the motels, we as a council should say, hey, if it's that bad, we need to do it. That's all I'm saying. But if you don't agree with me, I'll.
So can I? So I think where you're coming from is you're looking for a compromise. You're looking to, hey, how can we best serve our community? How can we best do our job as an elected official of this town? All right, as well as deal with the book, all right, with all the emergency management laws. I think that's where we're at right now, and that's good. At least we got a starting point, because we need to come back together on this. The community and the elected officials and everybody in between, we need to be here, okay? Because when we have that division, that's where we're going to have problems. So what I'm hearing, and I understand completely, is you want to have input, okay? I understand that, because I'm sure you have constituents that did not agree with the decisions that were put out. That's okay. That's what makes America great. We can agree to disagree. But, okay, and I'm going to use this very lightly as a but, in an emergency situation, we don't have time. All right, we've been on this topic now, just right here for about the last 22 minutes, okay? In an emergency situation, okay, now granted, COVID, we have a little bit more time, but, it's not like someone's home's on fire, somebody's laying on the floor with a heart attack. But you need to make rapid decisions. They need to be made fairly rapidly in order to protect the population, all right? That's just plain and simple. And like I said earlier, we want to do the most good for the most people. So trying to look at what your compromise is, I think what may work, and again, you may be totally opposed to this, and that's fine, because at least we're discussing this, we're talking about it. We go back into the state of emergency, okay? We run operations. In my timeline, I was going to show you up there earlier, if you want to go ahead and pull that up while I'm talking in the PowerPoint. We actually, the last time that we actually really did anything from a decision standpoint that involved COVID was the rally on June the 3rd. And the only thing COVID related is, how do we keep these people safe in a distancing manner and make this happen, okay? Along with the aspect of the safety and all the rumors and stuff that we're doing, okay?
But nothing has been done as far as decisions or anything made within that last month and a half. Okay, we haven't had to, thankfully. Once we came out of the executive order and we opened up our accommodations at 100%, which was on May the 29th, we really didn't have anything else at that point. So where I'm going with this is, if you just want to drop down a few at a time, that's fine. If you see anything you want to look at, that's okay too. But where I'm going is, look, if we go back into the state of emergency, we'll run it like an emergency. But Councilman McComb says, hey, let's meet once a week. We can do that. We can meet once a week. I can give you a more detailed report. I tried every single day, multiple times a day sometimes, to give you as detailed a report of what the response and recovery operation was in the town of Shanksville. You know, and if there's something I'm missing, let me know. I'm more than happy to give that to you. We talk about the bridge stops. Those bridge stops weren't to stop people from coming here. It was to get our message out, hey, you need to stay home, okay? We have limited supplies and resources, which we did in the very beginning, and even now from time to time, we see some issues, but that's stabilized, all right? We use that as a way also because we had the public. The public was calling all of us. I'm sure you all, but I know myself, I know the mayor, I know Manager West at the time. There's 1,000 cars coming down Maddox Boulevard. I mean, we all heard it. I know we did. Okay, well, guess what that checkpoint showed us the very first day we did it? There were 23 out-of-state tags that came through that checkpoint that day. 23. That was it. So guess what? It wasn't 1,000. So it wasn't to shut things down. It was for intel. It was to gain intel. And shutting the hotels down, same principle, okay? There were people coming in. They wanted to get out of here. And if we gave them a place to get out, they were coming. And we were not going to be safe because our workers were going to get it. Our citizens could get it. So back to the hotels, we had to make a decision. Now, when we made that decision to allow contractors to still come to this island. We wanted every means possible to keep revenue and stuff going. If you remember correctly, we were handing out little placards so that the contractors had that, so our law enforcement could identify them in the parking lots, you know, that people weren't coming here and they weren't supposed to. We did everything we could to work with those businesses. I know some businesses were very upset, and we worked through different things with them. Unfortunately, our contractors, it got to a point with the contractors that NASA was in the process of, again, working on their large projects. And a lot of our businesses support those large projects. So again, that is a key part of our community, especially in the shoulder seasons, is the NASA rocket programs. Well, they were going to bring people in from all over the United States and from out of the country. Okay, we're fine. You know where they were going to put them? On this island. No testing. We don't know where they came from, how they got here, if they could have had it, if they didn't have it. We had no means to find out. So unfortunately, we had to say, all right, what do we do? And we had to do it right then. And we did. Mr. West was a great resource with NASA, obviously, since he came from that location. Hey, can we put them up in your dorm? Put them in your dorm for 14 days. Make sure they're good to go. Let them come into the community. You know what NASA did? No, we're not going to do that.
Shut down.
All right? No, we can't do that. We're shut down. What are we supposed to do at that point? That's why that decision was made, to shut those down. So, if we were to go back into the state of emergency, I don't see in the short term any major things that come up. Certainly, I would recommend, hey, if we have time to involve council, let's involve council. Let's get them done. But certainly, I have no problem with, we go in the state of emergency, we meet once a week. You know, if that works, let's do it. The only thing I will caution, all right, let's go back to the NASA issue. Not a lot of people know about the NASA issue. There's some things in these emergencies that when we discuss them, it has to stay in this room. This room can't talk, all right? So again, when we do that, can we go into an executive session to discuss anything related to the emergency? That's something we would need to find out, you know, before we did something like that. If we could, in fact, can we go into an executive session to talk about certain incidents? Most of what we talk about, we can talk about right here. We can go out on the lawn and talk about it. But there's still gonna be those few things that may, again, I'm not saying it will, may come up. But what I will finish with, I hope that helps, but again, funding is secure, all right? I want that to be clear tonight, because funding is secure, all right?
And Brian, like you're saying, and like you're saying, we can have a meeting in 3 days, it can be called. Putting in officers at the bridge that was a decision that we could have made in 3 days. Closing motels is a decision we made in 3 days. They were coming, they weren't coming tomorrow, NASA. There's NASA people that were coming, their plan was to come here, but their plan was to come here probably not in 3 days.
Not in 3 days.
Not in 3 days. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Exactly what I'm saying is that there's something like that that's coming up, you call the meeting, and we decide on it together.
So-
I can't be in it, and like I said, and if,
And I completely understand where you're coming from. I don't.
all the major issues is what I'm talking about.
And I
Closing
don't-
down houses.
And
All those decisions
we
could have been
close down
done in
houses.
3 days. It wasn't nothing that was gonna kill
So-
nobody in that 3 day period. We
So
could
right
have,
here, we talk about the information point at the bridge, April the 8th. That's the first time that was discussed, okay, was April the 8th. You got a briefing on April the 9th. If you'll roll ahead one more day, please. All right, that we finalized the plan, that starting the morning of April the 10th at 0800, there was gonna be a checkpoint there. And we've called it a couple different things, checkpoint stops, but it was an information stop. It started at 0800 on the 10th. We rolled through to the 11th. On the 11th briefing that you were sent, and again, I sent you a briefing every single day, multiple ones on some days. On the April 11th briefing, you were told that there was still an information point, and you were given numbers from the previous day, which showed we don't have 1,000 people riding down Maddox. We got 23. All right, and now that ebbed and flowed, and I'm going to tell you, the weather helped us greatly through this. If we'd had good weather, like we do some years in early spring, I don't know what we would have done. But there was talk of closing Assateague, okay? Assateague wanted to close. They were, hey, we're going to close. We fought tooth and nail to keep Assateague open because not so much for the tourists, and granted, that would have made our job easy. If they couldn't have come to the beach, they wouldn't want to come here anyway. But our citizens needed a place to go. They didn't know it at that time, all right? But a week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, they needed to be able to go and decompress, all right? There's already fatigue. There's fatigue across the entire continent right now because of COVID. There's fatigue amongst us, all right? And there's certainly fatigue amongst our citizens. God help us if we were to get another emergency, a nor'easter, a hurricane. The fatigue would just be overwhelming. So again, most decisions could have been made in a 3-day time frame. Not all of them. And again, that's why we do that. And again, I do understand, and I do not begrudge you for wanting that say. I wholeheartedly agree and understand with you, but at the same time, I want you to understand what it really means when we're in an emergency state. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that work. I am. I mean, I like the idea you're entertaining hey, let's get back together, let's have a 1-week meeting, whatever it takes.
well, we can do it in 3 days. I mean, like I say, if something's coming up.
Sure.
We attended the VML training the last 2 days, and Mike, I think we're off on this 3-day meeting. The notice requirements 2.2-3707 post and notice requirements for meeting, and they talked about this in the VML training. For all local bodies, FOIA requires notice to be posted in 3 locations, and you have the 3-day requirement. Regular meetings post 3 working days before the meeting. Part D, special, emergency, or continued meetings, 2 elements. Notice must be reasonable under the circumstance, and public notice must be posted at the same time the members are notified. So I think any meeting we did COVID-related, since COVID's a state of emergency, we would be able to utilize the emergency meeting notice requirements under 2.2-307. And they had a specific question to that effect on that training that we did last week.
And they did, the opinion I got from.
And that's why, that guy was off, I think.
This was before the training that we took
Right.
on that. But he did consult several other attorneys in this group, as I said, and they felt that for this particular state of emergency, because it wasn't critically moving quickly, that we were required to give the typical 3-day notice. That was their opinion.
That's okay. They're saying it's not moving quick, and Brian's saying it's moving quick. I don't know what they're doing hardly, to be honest with you. But I mean, I understand the reason for meeting, but I think we're giving it out here with section D.
It certainly has the potential to move quickly.
Right. That's
But
what
at the time when I consulted him, you know, we had declared the state of emergency. We knew what we were doing. We were acting under the governor's orders, some of the mayor's orders, and we were proceeding at a road pace.
Right.
For lack of a better term. But we can revisit that with him, and I can certainly get an opinion.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to forward this to them, because this came right from the VML themselves. Yeah.
And the other thing I saw too, if I may, Article 2 under the Town Code, when it talks about council date of regular meetings, calling of special meetings, and I'll read it. The regular meetings of the council shall be on the first Monday night of each month at such an hour as the council may from time to time designate. If the night for the meeting shall fall on a legal holiday, the meeting shall be held the following night. Special meetings may be called by the mayor or any three members of the council. For a called meeting, every member shall be notified either verbally or by a written notice left at his domicile. It doesn't say anything about 3 days.
Well, in that case, I would have to say, because we have a state charter, we go back to the state code on that.
Right, but that is part of the Town Code.
But talking about the notification to the public though, is where you run into the snaky part, the gray area.
Which I think.
Public notice must be posted at the same time the members are notified.
Correct.
Now,
And I would need a code book, but state of emergencies are covered in town code, correct?
I would have to look at town code. I couldn't, honestly, right now, there's so many things going through my mind, I couldn't tell you whether they're or not.
Well,
I know that when we fall under disaster law, we declare a local emergency, we fall under this book, all right? Which is the 44 section, and there's all kinds of, you know, if you want some good reading some night, you can pull it up on the internet. So I don't know what's under town code as far as what it says we can do and what we can't do.
Okay.
I'm willing to look that up, research it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Dingley.
this compromise, you're 100% correct. Under the state of emergency is your rule. You're 100% correct. You have done nothing wrong. I'm not saying you've done nothing wrong. It is your rule. 100% correct. You can close down, if you were in it right now, you can close down the motels, hotel tomorrow. Right now, you could do it. You have all right. You've done nothing wrong. You heard that from Gene Taylor. I'll promise you've done nothing wrong. However, even if we went with this compromise, it would just be our faith and trust that that's the way you would run it. That was all it would be. That's all it would be. I'm not naive. I'm not trying to play a lawyer, but I'll cut through that chase real quick. We would just be putting our faith and trust in you. You would still have all those, by right, legally, if we went back in it, by every right, you would have the same right of shutting down everything tomorrow if you wanted to. What we would be doing if you went with this compromise, it's not anybody else's really choice except for us four voting it back in and you going along with it. Because like you say, when you go into a state of emergency, you're 100% correct. You have all the decisions. I agree with you. So if you took this compromise, you'd just be giving us your word saying, we'll have a 3-day meeting before we do something critical, that we'll post it, that we're going to have a meeting in 3 days, and we'll make that decision then. We would be putting our faith and trust in you. That's how you would operate it, not how it's legally done, because legally you're 100% correct. You would be making all the decisions.
And you would understand that if he made a decision that we didn't like, that's still his decision.
It would be his decision, and we would also have a decision for 4 of us say he's not abiding by it, and we have that decision too. But I think we can work better than that. It's not a thing. I think we can work better than that and trust. And I certainly trust him. And like I said, I would have to trust him to make this.
No, Miss Jean, unfortunately, no. I'm sorry, but we can have a whole week to say grace over here.
But if you,
This is just quick.
I still can't allow.
and Brother Arthur, I would not be making this compromise if I didn't trust you. Take my word for it. Because what I just said is 100% correct. You don't have to hire no lawyer. I would not be making this compromise if I did not trust you. Your word is better than what any lawyer would ever say to me.
I definitely want to go back in the state of emergency, not because it provides me with that power.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say too. And do I trust you? I absolutely have to trust you.
The only reason I'm hesitant, the example I'm gonna give you is just a for instance, just a spitball. We go back in the state of emergency. Our numbers dramatically start to go back up. We call a special meeting of council to discuss it. Mr. Rush's recommendation is to close down. Chief's recommendation is to close down. Mr. Tolbert's recommendation to close down. My recommendation to close down. It wouldn't matter what we decide because you four would have the votes.
Or
And-
3. And you make the decision, you break the tie. It's still that way. It would still be 3 people. It would really be 3 people because you would break the tie to be the 4th.
First off, you need to stop assuming that the 4 of us are going to vote
Right.
together. That's bull crap right there. For starters, to be accused earlier by Denise is for dirty politics that none of us had talked to each other. I can tell you that for a fact. But secondly, don't sit here and say that us 4 are going to vote that way. If it's something that's common sense, we're going to vote how we want to vote.
I'm
So
stating the
don't assume
4
that.
because the 4 voted to go out. of
Okay.
you.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the 4 of us going together beforehand and saying we're going to come out of it. So
I have not implied that.
no, but there's been letters from others that have implied that.
I haven't. I'm simply stating, if 4 of council, doesn't have to be you 4, it could be Miss Ellen, it could be Denise, and 2 others. If council decides, which is completely in their right to do it with this motion, they would override the employees and myself. And as Jean Lane noted, in town code, it states that it's my decision. But, you know, if this compromise gets us back in the state of emergency, I'm willing to work with anybody and anything.
Thank you. You want me to make a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will make this motion to go back in the state of emergency with the council included in all the decisions in the standard governing way.
I have a question.
Okay.
Our code clearly states that under the state of emergency, that man, or whoever's sitting in that seat, is the ultimate decision maker. Is that correct, Brian?
It does say that, yeah.
Okay. So, how can, under a state of emergency, how do we still give him the power to make the decisions he's got to make if, again, 4 of us?
This is a compromise of
disagree?
trust. And like I said, if I did not trust him, I would not make it. If he tells us that he,
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jean. Go ahead, finish your statement.
no, if I did not have the trust that he would not do what this motion says, then why would I make it? I wouldn't make it. Because like you say, I 100% understand that in the state of emergency, he has every right. He does not have to consult with us. He does not have to, he can do whatever. But in this compromise, what he is saying, if he would go along, just go back into the state of emergency, which is better, it was just saying it's better for the town. The town, he himself is saying that whatever decision he makes on anything, we go back to the standard governing way. Nothing legal. That's not even nothing legal. We would be putting our faith and trust in him that he would do that. And I will put my faith and trust in him to do that if he says he'll do it. And I would not.
Then we just go back in state emergency without that. What's the point? I don't know why. I mean, if you're going to go back to state emergency, you go back to state emergency. We ain't got to have a say. I mean, honestly, what's the point?
Because I believe in what he's saying. If he would tell us that
Well,
he
if
would.
you believe what he's saying, then let him go back in and stay like it was.
But he can like the thing, like
What you're
they,
saying don't make sense, Gene. It doesn't. None of it makes sense. I hate to tell you, it just doesn't make any sense, and we're beating a dead horse here. We've been in here talking on this for over an hour now, over the same thing. And if you want to go back in state of emergency, we go back in state of emergency, and we let him do what he was doing.
Amen.
That's all we got to do. It's simple, real simple.
I concur with Matt because, you know, under a state of emergency, that man right there, or again, whoever's sitting in that seat, makes the decisions. It doesn't matter how many majority of council it is. If he says, I'm closing down the motels, and 4 of us say, no, you're not doing that, he still has the right to make that decision under a state of emergency.
and 4 council votes the next day can say we're out of it, which would end it.
And depend.
But-
I'd like to consult an attorney tomorrow. If you go back in state of emergency, as it existed, of course, we know the powers that the mayor has. We know the powers that the council has or doesn't have in state of emergency. I'd like to consult an attorney tomorrow to find out, and unfortunately, we'll help us this evening, but find out if there is a way, maybe by resolution adopted by the council, that during this particular state of emergency, the mayor shall act with the approval of council or with the consent of council, if we can find the wording, so that the council has some input on this, and the mayor retains the power to make the decision. Or, in this particular state of emergency, can we adopt a resolution that specifically says that during this state of emergency, during this special state of emergency, the mayor and council can act together? I can ask him both things, I can ask an attorney both things, and find out if it's possible to adopt a resolution that says either one of those, so that the mayor and council can act together during this particular state of emergency. Other than the way the original state of emergency was done, which gives the mayor all power and the council basically not none, but it gives the mayor all power if he showed a desire to exercise it. What I'm suggesting is maybe a special resolution allowing a special relationship between council and mayor during the state of emergency.
I personally think that's great. Brian, I got a question for you. As far as, and you don't have to get up, as far as this COVID situation that we're in right now, in your professional opinion, how long would you expect us to be in this situation where we would need
So
it could be a year, right? It
Yes,
could be
it
6
could
months, it could be a year.
The discussion that I had with VDH yesterday was that they're going to request the governor add at least another 90 days.
Okay.
And they're gonna do it in 90-day increments, but certainly into winter, maybe even early next spring.
So I think Mike's exactly right here, and that's kind of what I was thinking as well, is if we can make a special resolution for this situation only, because this is a very unique situation. Our emergency operations plan was primarily built for weather events and stormwater management.
That's correct.
Not pandemics, which
No,
I'm sure we'll address as time goes forward
Absolutely.
when we update that. So, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. I would certainly make a motion to have you investigate that option and go forward with it.
At the same time, I'll investigate the code section for special meetings and special meeting notice. If we can get the special meeting notice squared away, as well as the relationship between council and mayor during this state of emergency, maybe we can make this thing work.
And I agree with you, and I think what we do is, as soon as you have that answer, we call a special meeting, and not wait to the meeting in August, but discuss it right then, so that we can make the best decision possible as quickly as we can.
Well,
That's a suggestion.
I second.
well, is that a form of a motion?
I said I would make a motion for him to make that investigation, and then us also, as soon as he has his information, call a special meeting to reassemble and listen to it and take a vote accordingly on what he finds.
I'm just.
I can make two separate motions if you need to.
I'm just trying to figure out the proper verbiage for it, Billy. I mean,
No. And I'll be glad to rephrase.
Okay.
I make a motion that Town Manager Talbert contact an attorney, number one, to find out if in this special, if we can have a resolution in this special state, in a special state of emergency to address COVID, where the mayor and council share responsibility for decision-making as they would more or less any other time decisions are made. And then also, once he has that information and he has the answer on how we go about calling a special meeting in a time frame necessary, as well as the posting to the public, call a special meeting so that we can all reassemble, listen to what he has, and then vote accordingly, if necessary.
You okay with that?
Yep. Second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. And again, is there any discussion?
I do have a question. Maybe not so much a question, but a statement. You hit the nail on the head. Our state of emergencies were set up for weather-related,
Hurricanes.
hurricane-related,
3 to
stuff
7
like that,
days.
Hurricane.
Yeah. Unprecedented territory that this town, county,
Totally.
country has been in. I don't know what any one of us up here could have done any different than what this man did. He made some very, very tough decisions on our behalf. And being in definitely uncharted territory, I would not want us to, right, I wouldn't want us to jeopardize what we've done so far, I certainly don't want to see, and don't get me wrong, Arthur and I are, we butt heads too, but I certainly
But I
don't.
still love you.
I know, love you too. But I don't want to see, and I don't think we're trying to do this, I don't want to see this man here be put down for his efforts that he's done, because he's done a tremendous job in getting us to where we are right now. That's all I have to say about that.
And I'll be as equally forthcoming. My motion has nothing to do with that. I'm not saying Arthur did a bad job at all.
Oh, I get that. I just have to say that for myself.
Right, I get it. I'm just saying that where we are, and I'm really trying to take that heat off of Arthur by itself, because like Brian said, at least the next 90 days beyond what the governor has right now, and we could possibly be in it a lot longer than that, probably until we ever find a vaccine, So I'm just saying, I think it gives you a continuity of government that you don't have, or you didn't have in the previous state of emergency. And, it was never designed for this long. Nothing was ever designed for this long.
And Mike, Mike, if you come back
Have to
with,
break soon.
if you come back with this lawyer's advice, how is it possible? How do we go about changing the town code? Can you do that to reflect?
I wouldn't advocate changing the town code. I want to
Special
see-
resolution.
Right.
My suggestion was.
It's a special resolution.
My suggestion was to see if it is legal for us to adopt a special resolution within the guidelines of the town and state code to allow us to operate in this a little bit differently under this particular state of emergency than we have been, than we operate under hurricanes, earthquakes, whatever else happens.
Okay.
Cats falling from the sky.
And Brian, just to be real clear on something else before we vote, but,
Sure.
so we're in this state of emergency for COVID, if we go back into the state of emergency for COVID.
Right.
All of a sudden hurricane comes down the coast, we have to declare a state of emergency for that hurricane.
That's correct.
And that would not impact the other state of emergency at all.
No,
And when we would vote to come out of that hurricane, or, then it would not affect that.
Sorry, Brian, most of the time, we don't even vote to come out of that state of emergency.
Okay.
It just goes
We just
away with
rescind.
the
Okay.
hurricane's gone, the state of
Yeah,
emergency's gone.
usually we rescind because we get through, but because we had it, and again, it makes sense the way they explained it to me is, hey, there's your fund. So again, we're finding some similarities and some not so similar, and you're all right, we can go out here today and grab the hurricane by the horns, but this is new. This is uncharted territory. So yeah, COVID stays COVID. There's nothing else. You know, we have earthquake tonight, tsunami. We're over here on a different resolution because it's a different funding stream for that now. So you're correct.
All right, cool. I'm just trying to learn. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have discussion.
Mr. Bob?
This has been my ongoing point that I've been trying to make. Our governance right now is being ruled by our emergency management plan, which doesn't mention pandemics and epidemics. The emergency management plan has that chain of command with author, blah, 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 right on down. That was put in there because of hurricanes, because of our inability to meet as a council. I believe our point's been made now that I think with this epidemic, with this pandemic, we're in a 2-year state of emergency in all reality. I mean, the way I look at it, it's going to be 1.5 to 2 years. He's going to say 90 days at a time, but it's going to go on. Vaccines, hairy science, the way I understand it, and I understand them a little bit. So we can't put a lot of hope in that. So we're looking at a 2-year state of emergency. I have a strong suspicion personally that when we rewrite our emergency management plan, we will accommodate for pandemics. That's a rhetorical question because I think we're going to have a lot of accommodations for pandemics. And they will then get us out of this one-person rule, and we'll be ruling as a council over the 2-year period that the pandemics exist. So I do support Billy's motion, and I support the, on the getting the resolution. And I'll throw another glitcher in there. I do believe we need to be in the state of emergency. I've not denied that. I didn't get a chance last time to talk about my reasonings, but I do truly believe we need to be in the state of emergency as a town. If anything, for the image of that. We got to take this thing seriously. You don't want to be the only yellow blob on the darn map. I mean, that's horrible. I mean, those guys in Westmoreland, they operate on a whole different schedule anyway. I know where that is. They're up on their own anyway. But we don't want to be the only blob on the marking book there. That doesn't look good for Brian and his buddies. So that's my 2 cents worth on the thing. I will support the motion, and I will vote for the motion.
Okay.
And I'll also vote to, I'll bring up another motion afterwards. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so let's one at a time. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, Mike, you're gonna be busy. No, you're off tomorrow, so we'll take care of it.
No, I have another motion.
Okay.
I make a motion that we go back in the state of emergency.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and a third to go back in the state of emergency as of
We'll call it
8/20.
8/20.
Today's date.
2020, July 16th.
Is the recorder on? All right. A motion, second, and third to go back in the state of emergency. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All righty. We are back in. Thank you all. Anything further before I go on?
No.
'Cause we still got a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need a Tylenol or something. Anybody got anything?
Does it?
You know why? Because you've been breathing this mask, your own carbon dioxide for 3 hours.
I know my ears are sore from it.
Oh, yeah, I know. And I'll get to it. Give me a chance. I was letting the public leave before we do that. We also have to make, and I'll, instead of calling individuals, I will, put it to the floor. Because we've all made a lot of comments, Mike. Is there any additional comments from council?
I do have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I got a question too.
All right, well, let's start off on the right, Miss Allen. Okay. Denise?
I got a question. Lynn Matthews in here talking about the ball field. Who would we have to talk to about that? Is that,
Jonathan Hamilton is the president of Little League now.
I mean, who does that land belong to?
The land is Accomack County Public Schools land.
Oh, boy.
We have a lifetime lease for $1 a year.
$1 a year lease, which I don't think has been paid in a while.
It's never been paid that I know of.
Call in the
And I don't think they're gonna foreclose on it.
So, Would that have anything to do with the name change, though?
Right now, it's just North County.
It is North Accomack Little League, and I mean, they could technically change the names of one of the fields over there. I mean, one of the fields is Kiwanis. I think another one's different ones. The fields are named after different organizations.
Yeah.
Basically, it would probably be in the best interest for her to contact.
Yes, them not because it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah, they have to contact Little League, right?
Yes.
All right, that's all I need to know.
And they would have to probably change their charter in order to change the name.
Unless they just name the fields that.
Yeah, if they name just the fields, then they're
they
fine.
wouldn't
You
be
can name it so and so Little League Park
Yeah.
for North Accomack Little League.
Right. Anyhow, not our purview, but Bob?
I concur with Denise. I'd like to see us follow up. I guess this is a Parks and Rec thing, actually, that we need to follow up on this because I think that's a neat piece of history. Also, we attended FOIA training this past week. Lily and I did. Just to throw a little note out to the council, everybody has to have a certificate of FOIA training now, passed as of July 1st, 2020. You have to have a certificate of FOIA training that has no less than a 2-year expiration date. We fortunately just got ours last week. It's very informative. FOIA is changing monthly, according to the Supreme Court and the Attorney General. So just to give you all a heads up that you need to get your FOIA certificate in the near future.
I can add only that we do have a FOIA training set up for the Civic Center in the fall.
Hallelujah.
There you go. So we're covered.
Time for everybody to attend.
That's all I've got. Thanks, sir.
Okay, now following up on you, Mr. Pop. We do, as a town, own a ball field down in Memorial Park. That's not named. We
That's
could
not- You could name that.
name the park ball field,
Good.
and hallelujah, we could fix the ballpark, because
Yeah, it needs it.
it needs it.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's gotta have some
bad. So, Mr. Pop, Parks and Rec meeting,
Nope. Oh yeah, that's me. I forgot. That's the new one. This for me now. Yeah.
we could definitely.
Thanks,
name that-
Denise.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We could definitely name that ballpark for him. And tie it into fixing it up. We could have all kinds of,
Yeah.
if and when we ever get back out of this stuff, we could have ball games down there. Anyhow, all right, that's taken care of.
You good, Chris?
Good.
Okay.
Come.
Two things. Number one, I've been reading through the minutes a lot since I got voted in. And a couple things that I noticed when I was going through the minutes is we used to get a quarterly update from the local Accomack Board of Supervisors rep. In council meetings, we would invite them to come and participate. So with Billy Joe, I think we have somebody that's pretty easy to work with from a local standpoint.
He's only been a few times.
Yeah, I spoke to him last night and asked him just to make sure I'd missed it. And so I would like to see us re-invite him to come quarterly and give us updates on what the county's doing. And then also be a good way of communication in case we need help for him with anything with the county. And of course, changes in emergency and things like that in the town, I mean, I think that's important as well. If, just like with the COVID updates and things like that we keep them informed what we're doing. So just something I personally would like to hear from him quarterly if the council and mayor agree. And then the last thing I have is also on our training last week with VML, they talked a lot about social media presence, especially with elected officials, and what that means when you use your personal social media page as a platform for your elected office. And basically what happens is your social media page becomes a matter of public record and has to be maintained. So, you can't go and delete, even if you want it to be done with Facebook, you can't go out there and just delete your Facebook page. It has to be maintained if you use it to voice your opinions on issues. So one of the things that we've heard throughout the election, and Pat's had it all over her page all through the spring about not hearing anything from the mayor and council and things like that through the whole state of emergency that existed at that point, is VML has folks that can help us have a better social media presence for the town itself to let people know what's going on. So my thing is, and maybe we talk about it at the August meeting, we put it on the agenda to talk about it more, and maybe by then, Mike could possibly get some information from us as far as from the VML, what's possible to increase that social media presence. You know, things like Brian's reports that he gives on what we're doing with COVID and things of that nature. We could fashion one of those updates to put on social media every day so that the public, the businesses, all those type of folks always know what's going on with that. You know, something that we could continually update. So that's something that I would like to, if the mayor, at the mayor's pleasure, if we could add that to the August agenda, get some information between now and then, and start working in that regard to keep the public better informed from a social media standpoint. And then I think that also keeps us from feeling the need of having to use our personal social media to keep people informed. I mean, you can share, you know, meeting updates and, you know, dates of meetings and all that kind of stuff, but when you're using it as a platform, then it becomes a matter of public record, is what we learned. So that was something I want to throw out there and see if we could get on the August agenda. And other than that, I appreciate everybody's comments tonight, everybody's time, and glad that's over. That was my first meeting, everybody.
Mr. Dean?
Well, I think bridges were built, trust was shown, even with the motion. I think you agree, Brother Arthur. With that motion, trust was shown, and we do. And I appreciate, I know there's a lot of people tonight looking for another fight, but they were disappointed.
I think there've been a few council meetings where it might have gotten a little bit more contentious, but
no, I don't think
that was in the past.
But I think bridges were designed to be built. Appreciate the handshake you give back to me right off the start of the meeting, and I'll tell you to your face, we might squabble like they said, but I'll leave you too. I know a lot of people will say that, but I mean it, but I do appreciate how everybody got along and showed some trust and things that will get done, and you know what we want, and you know what we want from you, and I have all intentions that during this long period of time we need to work together, and I think we will. I really think we will.
Precisely. We definitely need to work.
I think we will. I really think we will. No, I'll be shocked if it don't happen.
Mr. Reed?
I'm all good. Nothing's been said tonight.
All righty. Thank y'all. Not going to get much out of me except that you're right. Everybody's right. We got to work together. We're not in it for ourselves. We're in it for the town. And this is a good thing, a very good thing, what we're doing. All right, I will entertain a motion to go into closed meeting according to 2.2-3711A13 Code of Virginia to discuss personnel matters or acquisition of property. Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. He's buying a pizza.
Take a break.
Arthur's ears are going to be permanently deformed. That thing had his ears pulled like this the whole meeting. It about to set me crazy. I was getting ready to come over there and take the mask off of you. I don't know how he's taking that.
Everybody's gonna start having them ears.
Good.
Fast ears.
I know.
It's out of your wheelhouse, but.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Brian.